No matter how one looked at it, the red string in Shukei's hand appeared utterly ordinary, just a common object. However, given that Mr. Bai could effortlessly bestow the supreme true profound art of creation with a mere casual remark, how could he possibly gift the children something so mundane? Especially when Li Fan's gaze swept over Shukei, and the moment he slightly eased the killing intent in his heart, an overwhelming sense of imminent danger surged within him. Li Fan instantly understood that if he truly lost control and attacked Shukei, then the first to die would undoubtedly be himself. Yet Shukei remained completely unaware of the red string's value. He simply felt immense joy, solely because it was a gift from Mr. Bai. Let's go. It's time. Lu Ya's gaze was deep as he took one last look at Shukei. Then, he silently flew out of the 10,000 Beasts Ark and formed a hand seal. A dim light enveloped the flying vessel in absolute silence. The 10,000 Beasts Ark tore through the void, sailing toward an unknown homeland. The very moment the vessel departed from the Xuanwang realm, Li Fan, who was standing above Shukei's head, suddenly felt as though everything around him had frozen in absolute stillness. Then, just like an old photograph weathered by time, the colors gradually faded away. In the end, everything shattered into countless fragments, dispersing like falling stars. Li Fan understood. This was because he had resolved the lingering obsession of the heavenly fate Blackbird and completed the beast-taming sex upheaval. However, unlike before, he did not immediately return to the real world. Instead, he found himself back inside the distorted, transparent bubble where he had been after entering the fallen immortal realm. Before him, a new light projection emerged. In the rapidly shifting images, a vast, spiraling abyss could be vaguely seen. Within it stood a colossal stone sword. Thousands upon thousands of cultivators toiled like ants beside it, fervently refining countless materials into the sword's core, using the raging flames of the earth itself. This seems to be unlocking a new storyline, it looks like. The Heavenly Sword Sect, and the world-sundering divine weapon. Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Unfortunately, perhaps because he had just left the fallen immortal realm, he was not yet able to enter this entirely new scene. I'll have to wait until next time. In the flickering imagery, countless cultivators came and went, streaking through the sky like flowing lights. Yet that world-sundering divine weapon stood immovable, its presence growing ever more imposing as time passed. It exuded a peculiar power, drawing Li Fan's gaze for a long while before he finally looked away. When he turned his attention to the first two completed light projections, he noticed subtle differences between them despite both being marked as cleared. The projection of Questing Yuan's longevity Frui shone like a perfect sphere, radiating light in all directions, pristine and flawless. However, the projection of beast-taming sex upheaval was only partially illuminated, with most of it still shrouded in darkness. Li Fan mused, perhaps Xiaohei's obsession, like senior brother Zhang's, is merely a surface-level illusion. The true master of the beast-taming sect's time-space continuum may be someone else entirely. He carefully reflected on his experiences within the fallen immortal realm, piecing them together into a coherent narrative. Even as the surrounding distorted space grew increasingly unstable, he still had no clear answer. Then, the bubble shattered. Li Fan returned to the real world. At the same time, a black feather appeared in his hand. The remnant of the black bird. Accompanying the heavenly fate Blackbird's feather was a fleeting, blurred memory. A moment from history, a real event that had once happened to Xiaohei. Just like what Li Fan did, Xiaohei was full of confidence in himself. Ignoring Shukei's dissuasion, he insisted on taking the heart-linking ring test. However, after all, he was merely a demonic beast and did not have Li Fan's extraordinary fortune of possessing the immortal heart mantra. Without a miracle, the final result was inevitable. He failed to pass the heart-linking ring trial, which required him to never harm his master. Originally, Xiaohei was destined to be executed along with the many other demonic beasts that failed the test. However, due to Shukei's desperate pleas, Luya was moved by compassion. In the end, he made an exception and spared Xiaohei's life. To prevent any leaks of information, Luya requested Emperor Sanmo to intervene, banishing Xiaohei to a desolate small world where he was forbidden from leaving for 1,000 years. Xiaohei, we will definitely meet again. At the moment of their reluctant farewell, Shukei spoke with tear-filled eyes. The heavenly fate Blackbird was also overcome with sorrow, letting out mournful cries. Yet, it understood that without the restriction of the beast control technique, it could not suppress the violent nature within its heart. If it insisted on staying by Shukei's side, it might end up harming him instead. Forcing itself to remain calm, it gently brushed Shu Kei's head with its wing as a sign of comfort. Xiao He, by the time we meet again, a long time will have passed. We will have grown up, will you still recognize me then? Shu Kei asked with a trace of worry. Xiao He was about to mock Shu Kei for this seemingly foolish concern when he suddenly saw Shu Kei slap his forehead, then extract a drop of his own essence blood. Placing it inside a brown jade bottle, Shu Kei solemnly handed it to Xiao He. Here, take this. You must not forget me. Though Shu Kei's little face had turned slightly pale, he still forced himself to smile bravely. The heavenly fate blackbird let out a sorrowful cry and swallowed the brown bottle into its stomach. After parting ways with Shu Kei, Xiao He was banished by Emperor Sanmo's spell, exiled to a barren small world. The scene shattered, and the memory ended there. Li Fan recalled the final image that flashed in his mind, the desolate and ruined scenery reflected in the heavenly fate blackbird's eyes. A sudden sense of familiarity struck him. It was the very same small world that Han Yi had accidentally entered earlier, the one filled with various hybrid creatures of man and beast. So, the fallen heavenly fate blackbird really was Xiao He. Li Fan pondered for a moment, and suddenly, a thought sparked in his mind. I wonder if Shu Kei's drop of essence blood is still there. The imperial royal bloodline, the method to control beasts. A vague plan began to take shape in Li Fan's mind. Xiao Qing, Li Chenfeng, and the other members of the empire had been extremely cautious. Ever since Li Fan had warned them that the Xuanwang realm was about to face a great war and that they should halt all transactions for a time, they had completely withdrawn and disappeared. According to the final surveillance scene from the formless killing intent, they seemed to have temporarily returned to the empire. I've never tried creating a clone using a cultivator's essence blood. If Shu Kei's drop of blood is still there, I might just be able to give Xiao Qing and their people a surprise. Li Fan's eyes flickered. After a moment, he temporarily suppressed this thought and carefully examined the remnant of the black bird. The gains from the fallen immortal realm this time included not only this feather but also some residual memories of Xiao He's innate divine ability, Mandate of Heaven is mine. Although he did not possess the bloodline of the heavenly fate blackbird, with the help of this feather, he could still manifest some of its effects. As he absorbed the remnant of the blackbird into his body, a familiar sensation, akin to when he had possessed the blackbird for cultivation, surged through him. His perspective suddenly shifted upward, allowing him to observe his own destiny. A nearly imperceptible white pillar of smoke lingered around him, as if it could be blown away by the slightest breeze. White, green, blue, red, purple. Even among mortals, my fortune is considered among the worst. Li Fan narrowed his eyes slightly, but despite facing this discouraging fact, his heart remained calm. What is known as fortune is merely one of the factors that influence a person's fate and opportunities. For someone like Li Fan, who can reincarnate repeatedly, if opportunities do not come to him, he can simply seek them out himself. As long as it is not the kind of black misfortune that brings endless calamities and unpredictable disasters, it doesn't matter much. Following the cultivation method of Mandate of Heaven is mine, Li Fan practiced for half a day. However, he soon frowned and stopped. After all, I am relying on a single feather. Compared to a true black bird, my progress is far too slow. Unlike Shu Kei, who can absorb fortune from benefactors, just cultivating foolishly like this would take hundreds of years before I could accumulate any substantial fortune. Fortune, HMPH. Faced with a bottleneck in his cultivation, Li Fan immediately shifted his approach. With the aid of truth, I can foresee events ahead of time. I don't need fortune at all. Fortune and fate are intertwined, resonating with the heavens and flowing through the world. But if it manifests outwardly, it becomes a weakness. If I'm not careful, I might be targeted by cultivators skilled in this field. A thought arose in Li Fan's mind, and a plan took shape. Activating his divine ability, this time, instead of nourishing his own fortune, he did the opposite. He channeled his already meager fortune entirely into the black bird feather within him. From his perspective, it was as if a small vortex appeared on his body. The faint white column of fortune struggled momentarily but was ultimately unable to resist and was drawn in. Perhaps because his fortune was already so thin, even after it was completely absorbed, Li Fan felt no discomfort at all. Now, even if Li Fan used the black bird's divine ability, he could no longer see a fortune column above his head. It was as if he had become one of the legendary, fortuneless ones. All good luck and opportunities have nothing to do with me. But on the other hand, without fortune backlash, my chances of encountering disasters are significantly reduced. Upon observing the blackbird feather in his dantian again, Li Fan noticed that after absorbing his fortune, it seemed to glow just a little brighter. I am not truly a fortuneless one after all. Even if my fortune disperses for a time, it will regenerate naturally through daily activities. However, with this feather, I can reabsorb my fortune at any time. At a critical moment, I can unleash all the fortune stored in the feather at once. Perhaps it will even allow me to turn the impossible into reality. His thoughts raced, but once he sorted them out, Li Fan felt very satisfied with his gains in the fallen immortal realm. Sensing the flow of time, he estimated that he would need to wait over a year before he could enter again. Heavenly Sword Sect. In the past 2 scenarios, Mr. Bai has always played an important role in the shadows. I wonder how this sword forging event at the Heavenly Sword Sect is related to him. A moment later, Li Fan set aside his thoughts. While he had been wandering through the fallen immortal realm, Lu San had already informed all the sect disciples of the method to enter. Hearing that they could travel back to ancient times in an unconventional manner, the disciples were all thrilled and eagerly tried it out. The time periods they entered were diverse and strange, anything and everything was possible. After they awakened, Lu San assigned a team to collect and organize their experiences. To him, the fallen immortal realm was essentially an enormous treasure trove, a free trial ground. If used wisely, it could greatly accelerate the revival of Medicine King Sect. When Li Fan emerged and learned of this, he compiled the strategies he had seen in the Seeker of Immortality section and shared them with the disciples to improve their efficiency in exploring. Regarding the gains from the fallen immortal realm, Lu San had once proposed that all disciples submit their findings to be distributed under Li Fan's management. However, Li Fan rejected this idea. Seizing someone's opportunity is akin to killing their parents. However, the bloodline transmission technique had yet to reach the level where others could be regarded as mere slaves. If it provoked rebellion among the disciples for the sake of insignificant benefits, it would be a complete loss. Stability comes first in all matters. Li Fan once again reminded Lu Sandao. With Lu San's flattering words, "Young master's foresight is beyond my own," Li Fan quietly left the Longevity Valley. As he traversed the white mist and was about to return to the normal territory of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance, he suddenly discovered a patrol team of nascent soul cultivators guarding the barrier outside the mist. It was clearly a response to the continuous harassment and attacks by the Five Elders Association. With a slight smile, Li Fan silently bypassed them and headed straight for Loyan Prefecture. His target was none other than Han Yi, who had already turned into a stone statue. Li Fan did not know what kind of transformation Han Yi had undergone, but the stone statue he had become was truly eerie. Previously, when investigating through the Tianquan mirror, Li Fan had noticed that despite a long time passing and countless cultivators passing by, none had been able to detect Han Yi's presence. Let alone the fact that the stone statue was continuously absorbing the fortune and fate of nearby living beings. From the scattered clues Li Fan had gathered, it was evident that the influence of Han Yi was slowly expanding. If he remained in this state indefinitely, it was conceivable that one day, the entire Loyan Prefecture would be affected. Although Li Fan had been aware of this before, he had no means to resist the method of absorbing fortune, nor was he willing to take the risk of investigating further. But now, after obtaining the Heavenly Fate Blackbird feather and gaining the ability to use the divine powers of the Blackbird, he felt he could attempt an investigation. After more than 10 days, Li Fan arrived at the mortal town from his memories. It was not far outside this town where Han Yi had been turned into a stone statue by a single glare from the old fisherman. At this moment, it was clear that the town had already fallen within the range of Han Yi's influence. Looking over, Li Fan saw pillars of fortune and fate rising from the heads of the mortals in town. Regardless of their quality, each one was entangled with a dense black mist. The specific manifestations were evident: misfortune plagued every single resident. Some stumbled and injured themselves for no reason, which was already considered fortunate. Others choked to death while eating, failed in business and lost everything, or even suffered complete ruin. Some mortals had begun to notice that something was very wrong and attempted to flee. However, as soon as they reached the outskirts, they died inexplicably due to various strange accidents. Observing from the sky for a while, Li Fan noticed that when a mortal died, their pillar of fortune immediately shattered. At that moment, the black mist entwining it devoured it ravenously, swallowing it entirely before suddenly vanishing, its destination unknown. Interesting, Li Fan mused. Just as this thought crossed his mind, he suddenly felt a chilling sensation behind him. Something was rushing toward him at high speed. His expression changed slightly, and he swiftly dodged, barely avoiding a streak of sword light. Be careful, fellow Taoist. The sword light narrowly missed Li Fan and struck the mortal city below. Boom! In an instant, the entire city was annihilated by the sword light. The mortals within had no chance to even scream before being completely wiped out. A sharp sword aura seemed to brush past, leaving a chilling sensation. Li Fan looked down at the now obliterated mortal city, which had turned into a massive crater, and couldn't help but twitch his face. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. If he had been hit by that sword light, not only would his body have been destroyed, but even the foundation of his inner cave heaven might have been damaged. Luckily, he wasn't too unlucky and hadn't been too close. Otherwise, if he had been covered in the immortal mortal miasma, he might have truly perished on the spot. To be affected this much even from such a distance from the statue, Li Fan's expression turned serious. He extracted and replenished his lost fortune using the power of the black bird feather and quietly activated Domain of Mandate to prevent further loss of his fortune energy. As the smoke below dissipated, at the bottom of the crater, a wooden sword was firmly embedded into the ground. It seemed somewhat familiar. Ah, fellow Taoist, my sincerest apologies. At this moment, the owner of the wooden sword finally arrived, wearing a look of embarrassment and guilt as he spoke to Li Fan. It's all my fault for lacking mastery in my techniques. I nearly cost you your life. Li Fan glanced toward the newcomer. Although the other party didn't recognize him, Li Fan, on the other hand, was very familiar with him. This was none other than the famous second-generation immortal of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance, the obedient son of immortal sage Fei Shui, and the one known by the moniker, I am invincible, Shuo Feng. However, in the recent, friendly exchange duel, between the 10,000 Immortal Alliance and the Five Elders Association, Shuo Feng had appeared as a soul transformation cultivator. Yet now, he appeared to only be at the Foundation establishment realm. It's not a concealed cultivation. Did he undergo some kind of enlightenment, disperse his power, and restart his cultivation? Li Fan's gaze swept over Shuo Feng, his eyes flashing with a hint of undetectable curiosity. So, it's fellow Taoist Shuo Feng. Li Fan cupped his hands in neither an overly respectful nor dismissive manner. I almost thought it was another scoundrel from the Five Elders Association causing trouble. Shuo Feng's face reddened slightly. He wasn't surprised that Li Fan recognized him but hurriedly explained, it's a misunderstanding. A total misunderstanding. I was in midair, comprehending my cultivation, but for some reason, this wooden sword suddenly lost control. Fortunately, you reacted fast, or else I would have unintentionally committed a great sin. Hey, no worries, I can tell you didn't do it on purpose. However, what happened to your cultivation, fellow Taoist Shuo? Li Fan examined him deliberately, pretending to be puzzled. Shuo Feng didn't hide anything and replied frankly, nothing much. I just felt I was on the wrong path before, so I decided to start over. Although Li Fan had already guessed as much, he still put on a shocked expression. Studying Shuo Feng for a moment, he shook his head slightly and sighed. Reaching soul transformation is already the ultimate goal that most cultivators dream of, yet, fellow Taoist, you had the resolve to start over just like that. Truly admirable, admirable. Li Fan cupped his fists in praise. Shuo Feng chuckled, indifferent to the compliment. I'm not as extraordinary as you make me out to be. I simply have my mother backing me up. Even if I fail this time and remain a Foundation establishment cultivator for the rest of my life, how many in the 10,000 Immortal Alliance would dare to look down on me? But for an ordinary cultivator, if they fail, that would be a true disaster. Li Fan smiled without commenting, neither agreeing nor refuting the remark. Instead, his gaze shifted to the wooden sword embedded in the crater below. Frowning slightly, he remarked, even though you restarted your cultivation, you're clearly not an ordinary Foundation establishment cultivator. Judging by the speed and power of that wooden sword, it could likely kill an average golden core cultivator with ease. Shuo Feng nodded in agreement. You have sharp eyes, fellow Taoist. This wooden sword. He paused momentarily before continuing, to be honest, this sword is a natural treasure that I acquired upon rebuilding my foundation. However, despite successfully using it to establish my foundation, I still can't fully control it. It's quite the headache, he added, pointing downward. Yet, the wooden sword in the crater merely trembled slightly, refusing to heed his summons and remaining firmly stuck in the ground. Even with his usual composure, Shuofeng couldn't help but show a trace of awkwardness. Clearing his throat, he tried casting multiple techniques, 3 in total. Finally, the wooden sword reluctantly returned to his hand. Li Fan carefully observed the wooden sword before him. The term, plain and unremarkable, wasn't enough to describe it. There were no engravings on the sword, no mysterious aura emanating from it. In fact, it looked incredibly simple, almost like a child's toy, carved crudely from wood. However, given the overwhelming power of its earlier strike, Li Fan knew this weapon was far from ordinary. A thought flashed through his mind, and Li Fan suddenly suggested, "This sword is quite interesting. Coincidentally, I have some insights into the way of the sword myself, but I've long struggled to find a worthy opponent to spar with. How about?" Shuofeng's eyes lit up upon hearing this and clapped his hands in excitement. "I've just made a breakthrough and was worried about finding a sparring partner. Fellow Taoist, your words are exactly what I was hoping for." His expression turned serious as he gripped the wooden sword lightly, taking a few steps back to put some distance between them. He pointed his sword at Li Fan and declared, "Just to the point of learning." "Agreed," Li Fan responded loudly. Before his words had fully left his lips, 81 azure water swords had already taken shape, assembling into a sword formation and whistling toward Shuofeng. This was Li Fan's adaptation of cloud water palaces, sea-stabilizing divine sword, utilizing the water attribute power of his inner cave heaven. He did not hold back. Even though Shuofeng was only a foundation establishment cultivator, he mobilized the full power of his domain. Water Dragon Roar. The azure water swords, guided by Li Fan's battle cry, spread out like a sea of dragons, surging toward Shuofeng from all directions. Yet, instead of fear, Shuofeng showed exhilaration. Closing his eyes, he made a single, slow yet lightning-fast sword swing just as the 81 water swords reached him. Ding, 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 the wooden sword flickered like white lightning, weaving through the storm of water dragons. With each strike, a crisp metallic clang echoed as his wooden sword clashed with each of the water swords. In the blink of an eye, his wooden sword had parried all 81 attacks. Shuofeng withdrew his sword. It seemed to have drained all his strength, his arm trembling slightly. But in the next moment, something astonishing happened. The 81 azure water swords, which should have been under Li Fan's control, suddenly turned against him, reversing their trajectory and charging at him. Moreover, a faint mysterious transformation had taken place. The assembled azure water dragon seemed to come alive in Li Fan's eyes. Faintly, he could even hear a dragon's roar, and the sword aura surged as the water dragon roared toward him. "This is..." A sharp gleam flashed in Li Fan's eyes, yet his reaction was swift. In an instant, the sky was bathed in blue light. A single sword radiance slashed out from Li Fan's position, cutting through the water dragon like a blade through paper. And without losing momentum, it streaked toward Shuofeng's face. In the next moment, it seemed that Shuofeng was about to be cleaved in half by Li Fan's sword light. But just then, Shuofeng swung his sword once more. Clang! The sword light struck the wooden sword, producing a sound like a hammer pounding against a massive bell. The two forces clashed momentarily. Then, in an instant, the sword light abruptly changed direction and shot toward Li Fan with even greater speed and sharper momentum. Once locked onto by the returning sword light, there was no way to dodge. Li Fan had no intention of revealing his true strength, and his probing attack had already served its purpose. Thus, he extended his right hand, directly manifesting his water attribute cave heaven, drawing upon the power of the domain to suppress the incoming sword light. Boom! The sword light, originally unleashed by Li Fan, seemed to have gained an even sharper edge after being rebounded by the wooden sword. Even though it was trapped within the domain, it did not lose its momentum. It roared forward with unstoppable force, determined to break through the restraints placed upon it. Li Fan let out a cold snort and exerted a bit more power. Only then was he able to fully suppress it. When he looked back at Shuofeng, the latter had not seized the opportunity to launch another attack. Instead, he seemed to be experiencing some kind of internal struggle, as he tried to calm the violently trembling wooden sword. "Let's end this sparring session here." Li Fan sighed and shook his head. "I am 2 major realms above you, yet our battle was evenly matched. That alone means I have already lost. A Heaven's Chosen will always be a Heaven's Chosen. A foundation establishment cultivator battling a nascent soul cultivator. It's simply beyond the reach of us ordinary cultivators." Li Fan appeared somewhat dispirited. Seeing this, Shuofeng, who had just regained control over his wooden sword, couldn't help but console him. Fellow Taoist, don't be discouraged. The only reason I was able to fight on equal footing with you is largely due to the power of this wooden sword. Perhaps it was because Li Fan's temperament resonated with Shuo Feng, or perhaps Shuo Feng simply had nothing to fear. After hesitating for a moment, Shuo Feng spoke with a hint of pride. To be honest, fellow Taoist, this sword is a wonder of the heavens. Your defeat is not a fault of battle. Gently stroking the wooden sword's blade, a trace of infatuation flickered across Shuo Feng's face. Hearing this, Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Feigning extreme shock, he stared at the unremarkable wooden sword in Shuo Feng's hand. A wonder of the heavens. Fellow Taoist, surely you must be joking. The wonder of the heavens are attuned to the Tao itself, elusive and unseen, never revealing themselves to the world. The only one widely known as the legendary derivative Law Jade. And you're telling me this broken sword is a wonder of the heavens? Li Fan deliberately voiced his skepticism. Shuo Feng chuckled. How could I be mistaken when I built my foundation upon it? This wonder of the heavens is called sword. As he spoke, Shuo Feng lightly swung the wooden sword, forming a dazzling sword flower in the air. Sword. Li Fan's heart trembled. Could it be that this object is the embodiment of the very Tao of the sword in the Xuanwang realm? He couldn't help but ask. Shuo Feng nodded and pointed the wooden sword toward a lush, towering tree in the distance. Under Li Fan's gaze, the tree underwent a mysterious transformation. A gentle breeze passed by, and as a leaf detached from its branch and drifted through the air, it brushed against another tree, yet in that moment, it was as if the leaf had become an incomparably sharp sword. A single slash. The tree was severed at its trunk. Another gust of wind swept through, carrying countless leaves aloft. The tree, now imbued with the sword's essence, moved like an unparalleled swordsman, continuously striking. One tree after another fell in its wake. This bizarre sight left Li Fan utterly dumbfounded. Perhaps, what fellow Taoist says is true. He feigned a stammer, as if in awe. Shuo Feng smiled faintly. Of course, I obtained this sword from the ruins of the former heavenly sword sect, risking my life countless times to do so. Looking at the wooden sword in his hand, Shuo Feng recalled that moment. If you had seen it with your own eyes, fellow Taoist, you would never be able to imagine the shock I felt. Within the heavenly sword sect's sword tomb, over 1,000,000 swords were buried. Those countless ancient swords, chaotically plunged into the ground, all bowed slightly in the same direction. As if paying homage to the Emperor of Swords. And at the very center of that 1,000,000 sword tomb, I found this. A trace of pride appeared on Shuo Feng's face. That day, I knew that defying my mother's wishes and insisting on retraining was the absolute right choice. Otherwise, how could I have encountered such an opportunity? The heavenly sword sect, the sword tomb. Li Fan stared at the wonder of the heavens, sword, as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. However, in the end, he abandoned the idea of immediately using his binding insect divine ability to claim the treasure for himself. A wonder of the heavens. Li Fan's eyes were filled with envy. Then, as if suddenly realizing something strange, he asked, such a secretive matter, yet fellow Taoist is casually telling a mere passerby like me. Aren't you afraid that this information will spread and be known to all? Shuo Feng waved his hand boldly and declared, I have always acted according to my whims. You knew my identity yet still fought me without reservation, that is commendable. Besides, what if you tell others? If I possess such a divine treasure and do not flaunt it, but instead keep it hidden, how would that be any different from wearing embroidered robes in the dark? Li Fan hesitated, but possessing such a rare artifact will inevitably invite covetous eyes. Petty thieves coveting it. Shuo Feng suddenly burst into laughter, exuding an undeniable dominance. A radiant golden armor materialized over his body, emanating an overwhelming pressure. Even Li Fan instinctively took a step back. Though my wonder of the heavens is exceedingly rare, it is useless to cultivators of the Tao integration realm and beyond. And below Tao integration, who can possibly harm me? Even if they could, I doubt they could break through the defenses of this armor. Shuo Feng gestured toward the golden armor with a complex expression. Li Fan had no words to reply. So this is the confidence of a top-tier immortal scion of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. But this works in my favor. If you weren't this arrogant, I'd have to put in much more effort to extract information about this wonder of the heavens from you. Suppressing his thoughts, Li Fan looked at Shuo Feng, who had already retracted his golden armor, and asked, although your wooden sword is indeed extraordinary, I feel that it still falls short of the legendary wonder of the heavens. Is it because fellow Taoist has not fully mastered it yet? Shuo Feng smiled bitterly. Your observation is sharp, fellow Taoist. A wonder of the heavens is indeed extraordinary. Even though I have built my foundation upon it, I still cannot fully control it. Sometimes, it even resists my will. Just now, it almost wounded you, that was why. Hearing this, Li Fan suddenly recalled a past life battle between Shuofeng and Su Xiaomei. At that moment, Shuofeng seemed to have fully mastered the heavenly wonder sword. From beginning to end, there were no signs of it going out of control. However, unlike now, back then, when facing Su Xiaomei's relentless attacks, Shuofeng had only defended, never once taking the initiative to attack. A streak of white light reflected all of the enemy's attacks back at them. In fact, the counterattack was even several times stronger than the original strike. The characteristics are exactly the same as a wooden sword. It just can't take the initiative to attack. Li Fan seemed to have figured out why Shuofeng had never been able to completely control the sword. After pondering for a moment, he thought that since Shuofeng would eventually have to comprehend it himself, he might as well offer him a helping hand. He then fixed his gaze on the wooden sword in Shuofeng's hand and furrowed his brows slightly. Logically speaking, with your unparalleled talent, even if it were the legendary wonder of heaven, it shouldn't be something that is difficult to control. Shuofeng agreed and nodded. I, too, am puzzled by this. Li Fan pondered for a moment before suddenly realizing something. I have a theory. I don't know if it's correct. Oh, please share it, Shuofeng responded politely, though he did not believe Li Fan would say anything truly insightful. A sword is a weapon of slaughter. Ancient sword cultivators were capable of taking a person's head from 1,000 miles away. A single strike could break 10,000 techniques. The essence of the sword manifests in the world in various forms: gold, jade, stone, but why, of all things, is this sword a wooden sword? Li Fan posed this question, and Shuofeng immediately furrowed his brows, his expression turning serious. I once heard that in the ancient sects of sword cultivators, disciples would only use wooden swords in friendly sparring matches where victory or defeat was not the goal. Therefore, Li Fan paused for a moment and then spoke in a solemn tone. I believe that sword is the pinnacle of all swordsmanship. As the saying goes, extremity begets reversal. Every trait of a mundane sword has been completely inverted in the heavenly wondered sword. Slaughter becomes non-slaughter. Seeking defeat is victory. Not attacking is triumph. Motionlessness is invincibility. Li Fan's words were like a great bell ringing in Shuofeng's ears, or a bolt of lightning under a clear sky. He was stunned. A strange glimmer flashed in his eyes as he re-examined the wooden sword in his hands, seemingly entering a profound and mysterious state. He stood there like a stone statue, murmuring something under his breath. It seems he was just one step away from enlightenment. Now that I have pointed it out, he has instantly comprehended it, Li Fan thought to himself as he quietly activated his blackbird divine ability to observe Shuofeng's fate. A towering pillar of purple chi shot into the sky, spiraling like a dragon tornado, coalescing without dissipating. This was a sign of supreme destiny, only slightly weaker than Shu Kei's. The pillar of fortune was so resilient that even Han Yi's fortune absorption domain, formed by his transformation into a statue, could not affect it. Well, of course, without great destiny, how could one be born into such a favorable position? What countless cultivators struggle for their entire lives to obtain, he has never lacked since birth, Li Fan sighed as he observed Shuofeng's astonishing and heaven-defying fortune. In this Xuanwang realm, it is rare for two Tao integration immortal sages to choose to have a child together, he mused, recalling the rumors about Shuofeng and his mother. It was said that after immortal sage Fei Shui realized she had no hope of attaining longevity immortality, she decided to place her hopes in her offspring. To produce the most exceptional descendant, she chose the oldest yet most effective method, a martial contest for a spouse. She declared that any Tao integration cultivator who could defeat her in combat would be qualified to become her Tao companion. Given the rarity of Tao integration cultivators, each one a 1 in 10 million genius, the combination of their bloodlines, along with the full support of both parents' resources, might produce another longevity immortal. When the news broke, the entire world was shaken. Countless cultivators, eager to witness a grand battle among Tao integration cultivators, gathered to watch. However, the outcome was a major disappointment. Few responded to the challenge, and nearly a year passed before a single Tao integration cultivator stepped forward to challenge Fei Shui. He ultimately failed. It was then that the broader community of cultivators realized. Tao integration cultivators are incredibly rare across the Xuanwang realm. Those who have reached this stage have exceptionally high ambitions. Unless faced with extraordinary circumstances, they would never so easily abandon their pursuit of longevity immortality, their ultimate goal. Furthermore, while Fei Shui's combat strength was only average among Dao integration cultivators, she was extremely skilled in artifact refinement. With her formidable arsenal of defensive treasures, defeating her was easier said than done. Without absolute confidence, any challenger would simply be seeking humiliation. Thus, due to these various factors, Fei Shui's martial contest for a spouse fell into an extremely awkward and quiet state. Just when everyone thought this matter would gradually fade into obscurity, an event that shocked the world once again occurred. Fei Shui was suddenly pregnant. And apart from herself, no one knew who the father was. She refused to speak on the matter and officially declared the contest null and void. From that moment on, she devoted herself entirely to nurturing the child in her womb, Shuofeng. There was no doubt that the one who had managed to make immortal sage Fei Shui conceive in complete secrecy must have been a terrifyingly powerful Dao integration cultivator. That much was certain. As for why he chose to conceal his identity, that remained a mystery. Not only does he have a Dao integration mother, but he also has a father hiding in the shadows, keeping his true identity a secret. No wonder Shuofeng is so confident. The world may be vast, but he can go anywhere he pleases. As Li Fan was lost in thought, Shuofeng slowly emerged from his enlightenment. A faint joy surfaced on his face, but after taking a deep breath, his expression gradually calmed. The hands gripping the wooden sword no longer trembled. As a mysterious aura descended and locked onto him, the heavenly wonder sword transformed into a gentle white light and gradually merged into his body. In an instant, Shuofeng's presence completely changed. His sharpness was entirely withdrawn. From being as sharp as an unsheathed blade, he now appeared utterly ordinary. Even the towering purple fortune pillar above his head gradually faded under Li Fan's gaze, eventually turning into an unremarkable white mist, so subtle that, if one didn't look closely, it could easily be overlooked. Shuofeng turned his gaze toward Li Fan. Li Fan withdrew his blackbird divine ability and cupped his hands. Congratulations, Taoist friend, for returning to your true nature and achieving supreme mastery. Supreme mastery? That's an overstatement. However, Shuofeng made a refined gesture of invitation. I would like to ask you to test my sword. Li Fan naturally understood his intention. With a flick of his fingers, several blue water swords flew toward Shuofeng. Shuofeng stood with his hands behind his back, neither dodging nor blocking. Just as the water swords were about to strike him, a streak of white light flashed. The water swords completely reversed direction. Chapter 662. Fellow Taoist, this reversal sword of yours, what is the highest level of power it can reflect? Feeling the rebounded attack nearly doubled in strength, Li Fan's expression changed slightly. With a wave of his hand, he suppressed the water sword before turning to ask Shuofeng. Shuofeng seemed to still be reflecting on the self-protective reaction of the wooden sword. After a long while, he finally returned to his senses. The reversal sword, he shook his head. I see it as the sword of pacification, the sword of no battle. Without further explanation, Shuofeng continued, ordinary nascent soul cave heaven power can be countered effortlessly. If it were a full-force strike from a soul transformation cultivator, it would be somewhat difficult. As for Dao integration and beyond, fellow Taoist, you are only at the foundation establishment stage, yet you have already achieved such an astonishing feat. If you advance to the soul transformation stage, wouldn't you be able to fight against Dao integration cultivators? Li Fan expressed his shock. It's not that simple. Even among Dao integration cultivators, there are vast differences. The spirit of heaven and earth is divided into. Li Fan's heart stirred, and he was about to concentrate and listen carefully. However, he suddenly noticed that Shuofeng's lips were moving, but no sound came out. Shuofeng quickly realized this himself and decisively fell silent. Li Fan, deep in thought, tactfully refrained from pressing further. In any case, though I possess the heavenly wonder, I still have a long road ahead before I can defeat my mother. Shuofeng smiled bitterly. Moreover, although the heavenly wonder makes my foundation establishment extremely powerful, it also has its drawbacks. For instance, advancing in cultivation is much more difficult and slower compared to ordinary cultivators. Even with abundant resources and the aid of new cultivation methods, this remains true. This was the first time Li Fan had heard of such a thing, so he immediately asked, why is that? Shuofeng answered straightforwardly, the heavenly wonder is, in essence, the law of heaven. Once one establishes their foundation with it, it becomes nearly impossible to incorporate anything else. Ordinary cultivators must observe the laws of heaven and earth, seize its essence, extract its marrow, and refine its spirit step by step to ascend. But a cultivator of the heavenly wonder is different. They use the heavenly wonder as their law, as their cave heaven domain, as the transformation of heaven and earth, and as the very spirit of heaven and earth itself. As long as they continuously comprehend their own heavenly wonder to the utmost, they can progress all the way to the Tao integration stage without obstruction. Hearing this, Li Fan couldn't help but ask, isn't that a good thing? Why do you say it makes cultivation more difficult? Shuo Feng countered with a question, fellow Taoist, don't you think that compared to forcibly absorbing external elements, a cultivation method that relies solely on personal comprehension would be much slower? Naturally, Li Fan suddenly realized something and fell silent. Taoist Shuo, do you mean that cultivating with the heavenly wonder is more akin to practicing the ancient methods? Li Fan unconsciously changed the way he addressed him and quickly asked. More precisely, it is practicing the ancient methods while bound in chains. Shuo Feng sighed lightly. This is both its advantage and its drawback. However, I have no regrets. Although the path is more arduous, the potential ceiling is much higher. Seemingly reminded of something, Li Fan suddenly asked, if one reaches Tao integration through the heavenly wonder, then the next step would be to reverse the principles of the heavenly wonder. A flicker of admiration flashed in Shuo Feng's eyes. Exactly. The difficulty of achieving longevity immortality lies in this. Heaven and earth's principles are intangible and abstract concepts, difficult for ordinary people to perceive. To reverse them is even harder. One must search for the laws of heaven and earth, familiarize themselves with them, master them, and then finally overturn them. All of these steps must be completed within the Tao integration stage. While Tao integration cultivators enjoy long lifespans, every step forward requires an immense price. Throughout history, how many peerless geniuses have fallen just before taking the final step? But those who build their foundation with the heavenly wonder naturally bypass the first step. From the moment they begin cultivation, they are already practicing the second and third steps. It's almost like skipping half the effort. Shuo Feng explained patiently in a way that was easy to understand. And Li Fan gradually began to grasp the concept. Seeking, familiarizing, mastering, and reversing, it seems these correspond to the different sub-realms within Tao integration. Li Fan suddenly recalled something. Back when Ji Hongdao was confronting senior sister Zhao, he had once said, after a heavenly sovereign establishes their definitive law, they should no longer meddle in worldly affairs. A definitive law means that one has already reversed the laws of heaven and earth, ultimately replacing them and transforming into a part of the universe itself. This is the true path to longevity immortality. Before that, Tao integration cultivators still have 4 major steps to complete. Shuo Feng saw Li Fan lost in contemplation and couldn't help but caution him, what I have shared today is merely in gratitude for your earlier guidance. Do not become too ambitious or lose yourself in these thoughts. If that happens, my goodwill would have led to harm. Li Fan snapped back to reality and smiled. Taoist Shuo, you worry too much. I am not someone who fails to appreciate good advice. I used to believe that longevity immortality was just a few major realms away from us cultivators, and that I might one day reach it. But now, I realize that the gap is not just a few realms, but rather multiple chasms, each one capable of making a person despair. One must always have hope, though. Shuo Feng nodded in agreement, before suddenly making an unexpected remark. By the way, I still don't know your title. Given your character and talent, you must not be an unknown figure. Shuo Feng looked at Li Fan with curiosity. Li Fan cupped his hands and said, I am Li Fan. Shuo Feng narrowed his eyes and examined Li Fan carefully. It's just a common name. I have been mistaken for others many times in the past. Li Fan explained. Shuo Feng slowly nodded. I have a talent for sensing auras. Passing by this place, I noticed something unusual, so I descended to investigate. Who would have thought that before I could find anything, I was nearly killed by you, fellow Taoist? Li Fan actively explained the situation. In that case, I also feel something strange about this area. Shuo Feng suddenly realized and looked off into the distance. His gaze landed on a particular direction, the place where Han Yi's stone statue stood. However, he did not seem to notice the statue itself, only that something felt off about that location. Interesting. Fellow Taoist, why don't we go and investigate together? Li Fan suggested. That was exactly my thought. Shuo Feng, clearly someone unafraid of trouble, immediately agreed. Just as the two were about to set off, the sky suddenly turned pink. Shuo Feng's expression changed drastically. Scarlet snowflakes drifted down. A melodic female voice suddenly echoed, "Fenger, you've been away from home for long enough. It's time to return." Shuo Feng's face stiffened slightly. Yet, he dared not resist his mother's will. He only cast an apologetic glance at Li Fan. "I understand, mother," he responded. As he grasped a snowflake, the scarlet color melted in his palm. Moments later, his figure blurred and gradually faded from sight. Suddenly, a communication talisman fell from the sky and flew toward Li Fan. "If Brother Li ever needs help, feel free to contact me." Shuo Feng's voice lingered faintly in the air. Shuo Feng's voice grew quieter and quieter. In the end, as it became almost inaudible, the scarlet snowflakes falling from the sky also disappeared without a trace. As if it had all been nothing more than an illusion. Was it merely a coincidence, or was it his extraordinary fortune leading him to avoid disaster? Or perhaps, immortal sage Fei Shui has always been watching over Shuo Feng, unwilling to let him suffer harm. And upon seeing him about to step into danger, intervened to stop him. Li Fan remained silent, turning his gaze toward the stone statue of Han Yi. After a moment of contemplation, he descended to the ground and activated the heavenly mandate domain, walking step by step toward it. His pace was extremely slow because he was carefully sensing the power of fortune absorption in the surroundings. Since he was already infinitely close to the state of a fortune-less being, he was particularly sensitive to changes in his own destiny. After walking about 90 steps forward, Li Fan suddenly noticed a flaw appearing in his heavenly mandate domain. It was like a hole had been pierced in a cup of water. His already near non-existent fortune was rapidly draining away. The moment the last trace was completely exhausted, he saw dense black mist beginning to swirl above his head. An intense, ominous feeling surged through his heart, as if an impending catastrophe was about to befall him in the next moment. Li Fan quickly retreated, retrieving the fortune stored within the black bird feather at the same time. Even though his reaction had been swift, the effects of the drained fortune were immediate. As he stepped back, he stumbled, almost falling to the ground. A nascent soul cultivator like him, one who had formed his nascent soul using the 5 elements cave heaven, the pinnacle of methods, was actually tripping while walking. And yet, such an illogical event had truly occurred. Li Fan dared not hesitate. While firmly engraving the sensation into his memory, he accelerated the process of replenishing his lost fortune. Once he had stabilized himself and retreated to a safe distance, Li Fan discovered that nearly half of the fortune stored within the black bird feather had been consumed just to dispel the ominous black mist above his head. Even from this distance, so much fortune has already been drained. This fortune-draining statue is truly terrifying. Even someone as blessed as Shuo Feng wouldn't have been able to resist it and would have been completely drained. No wonder his mother took him away. This is not something mortal power can resist, unless worldly fortune. A thought suddenly struck Li Fan, and he immediately recalled the world where Xiaohe had perished. That beast realm's fortune had clearly been refined and integrated by Xiaohe. But not long ago, Xiaohe had fallen for unknown reasons, causing that fortune to shatter and scatter everywhere. Even with Han Yi's meager cultivation back then, he was able to absorb and control the free-floating worldly fortune. With the black bird feather in hand, Li Fan would undoubtedly have an even easier time absorbing the world's fortune. Moreover, a drop of Shu Kei's essence blood was also buried there. It seems I must make a trip. There are many powerful beast species hidden within that small world. In the past, when I was merely at the nascent soul stage and alone, I would have had some concerns. But now, a sharp glint flashed in Li Fan's eyes. He temporarily withdrew from the fortune-draining field and returned to Longevity Valley, summoning Lu San. Just as he was about to instruct Lu San to lead a group of Medicine King sect disciples into the beast realm to clear out potential threats, Li Fan suddenly sensed something amiss and hesitated. "Young master, what troubles you?" Lu San looked at Li Fan with a hint of confusion. Li Fan pondered for a moment, then reviewed the records stored in the Tao Deviation Stone, and finally came to a realization. At some point, he had once again forgotten about the calamity that had befallen Kongyansi. I wonder what Kongyansi looks like now. Is it a void of nothingness, or a barren wasteland? If it has already turned into the void, then does the entrance to the beast realm still exist? As thoughts raced through his mind, Li Fan's expression grew solemn. On my recent journey, I discovered something utterly terrifying. Without delay, Li Fan told Lu San about how Kongyansi had been destroyed and how the world had gradually forgotten about it. Kongyansi, Lu San was initially puzzled, but then, as the memories resurfaced, his face turned pale with shock. It's fortunate that, due to our move to Longevity Valley, we unknowingly avoided this calamity, Li Fan sighed. But Lu San was more focused on the fact that he had forgotten about Kongyansi's destruction. To make the entire world forget without them even realizing it. Is this the power of the new method longevity immortality? Lu San, whose understanding of longevity immortal sovereigns was still rooted in ancient times, was deeply shaken. After all, as one of the strongest Dao integration cultivators of the Medicine King sect, he had once met the longevity immortal sovereigns of the 10 great immortal sects. Although he had never considered himself their equal, he had at least believed he could put up some resistance. But now, in an instant, Lu San's pride shattered. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he became, cold sweat dripping from his forehead. Noticing Lu San's abnormal state, Li Fan reassured him, "Elder Lu, there is no need to dwell on this. The world has changed, and although the title, Longevity Immortal Sovereign, remains the same, the new method Longevity Immortal and ancient method Longevity Immortal are clearly not of the same level anymore." Despite his deep trust in Li Fan, Lu San took a long time to calm down. After a prolonged silence, he sighed deeply before turning to Li Fan and saying, "Today, I have finally witnessed the power of the new method Longevity Immortal. Before, I was merely a frog at the bottom of a well. The gap between the new and old method is this vast. Young master, I wish to transition to the new law cultivation method," Lu San solemnly declared. Li Fan was not surprised by this decision at all. He nodded in approval, "I support you. Elder Lu, reigniting your ambition is a blessing for our Medicine King sect. Who knows, you might attain enlightenment and achieve longevity immortality. If that happens, with a longevity immortal sovereign watching over us, our sect will finally return to the world openly and proudly." However, Li Fan's tone suddenly shifted. The old and new laws cannot be cultivated together. If Elder Lu wants to advance further and defy the natural order, he must completely rebuild his cultivation with a different Dao integration technique. First, such techniques are incredibly rare. Second, the refinement of the longevity pills still requires your expertise. Lu San immediately understood Li Fan's meaning. His previous enthusiasm dimmed slightly. The gap between ideals and reality forced him to make a choice. However, as someone devoted to the Medicine King sect, Lu San only hesitated for a moment before making his decision. "I understand, young master. For now, I will prioritize the revival of our sect," he said with some regret. Li Fan smiled faintly, "Elder Lu, you misunderstand me. I fully support your transition to the new method, and your cultivation breakthrough does not contradict our sect's revival. It just requires some preparation, that's all. Although it may seem a bit inconsiderate, we must admit that it was precisely this calamity that led to the demise of Taoist Zhou Qingang. As a result, the enormous debt we originally owed no longer needs to be repaid. As long as Elder Lu refines more longevity pills and other useful elixirs for sale, after a few years of accumulation, exchanging them for a Dao integration cultivation method won't be a problem," Li Fan said confidently. Upon hearing this, Lu San's eyes regained a glimmer of spirit. A few years of waiting was insignificant to him. As for Zhou Qingang, who had unfortunately fallen, Lu San had only met him a few times and had no deep connection with him. Naturally, he felt no sorrow. This person's death is truly convenient. It saved me years of effort, Lu San thought to himself. Li Fan continued, "During this period of accumulating contribution points, I also need to devise a reasonable identity for Elder Lu. After all, with your Dao integration cultivation, it's not as easy to conceal yourself as it is for people like us. Originally, I planned to use the excuse of an ancient cultivator awakening from slumber to get past any inquiries. But for some reason, recent events have made the cultivators of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance more cautious and skeptical of such claims. So, I need to come up with a more reliable explanation. But Elder Lu, don't worry, I already have some ideas in mind." Lu San did not dwell on the details of Li Fan's words. His natural trust in Li Fan made him simply nod in agreement. "Young master, you make the decisions." After temporarily reassuring Lu San, one of the 2 Dao integration cultivators of the Medicine King sect, Li Fan headed to the newly built artifact refinement workshop in Longevity Valley. There, he met another Dao integration cultivator, Fang Ziji. At this moment, Fang Ziji was staring intently at the Medicine King True Cauldron floating in the air before him, his eyes filled with fascination. After relocating to Longevity Valley, Li Fan had placed the Medicine King True Cauldron here for Fang Ziji to study. Beyond providing some comfort, Li Fan also hoped that Fang Ziji's artifact refinement skills would improve further, ideally to the point where he could enhance and modify the Medicine King True Cauldron. As for why this was necessary, in this lifetime, Li Fan intended to use his clone to control the Medicine King True Cauldron and break free from the Xuanwang realm, plunging into the Immortal ruins to uncover its secrets. He wanted to see with his own eyes, the figure within the Immortal ruins. Was it alive or dead? What did it truly look like? Li Fan knew that upon approaching the Immortal ruins, the terrifying gravitational pull would warp even time and space. A mere moment inside the Immortal ruins could mean tens of millions of years had passed in the outside world. Under normal circumstances, if one were to send and clone to explore, the immense time dilation would make it impossible to receive any information. The original body would simply perceive a loss of connection, and before any message could be transmitted back, the main body would have perished from the passage of time. But Li Fan had a way to circumvent this issue. It was thanks to the new ability Incarnation that he had awakened after absorbing the remnants of Tianyang. Transforming into an object, traversing the ages. In his previous life, with only a golden core cultivation, he had managed to exist in an incarnation state for over 3,000 years. Now, with his 5 elements cave heaven having elevated him to the nascent soul stage, his strength had undergone a qualitative transformation. Furthermore, he had awakened the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, which should allow him to endure even longer. It would be enough to withstand the long years and wait for his clone's report. The Immortal ruins concealed great secrets, including but not limited to the lost history of the Xuanwang realm and its future destiny. If he could glimpse its truth, it would be of immense significance to Li Fan, perhaps even revealing the mystery of the fallen immortals. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that the Medicine King True Cauldron could withstand the terrifying gravitational force of the Immortal ruins for long enough without disintegrating. The Medicine King sect, due to material and cost limitations, did not forge the Medicine King True Cauldron from the highest grade materials. However, its artifact refinement philosophy and techniques are unique and worth studying. Give me enough time, and I will definitely return to you a stronger Medicine King True Cauldron. When Li Fan presented his request for strengthening the cauldron, Fang Ziji responded with this firm declaration. And Fang Ziji was indeed highly skilled. The small cauldrons he casually refined in recent times were far superior to those used by disciples, already carrying traces of the true cauldron's essence. At that moment, Fang Ziji was so engrossed in his work that Li Fan had to call out to him several times before he finally snapped out of it. Li Fan then narrated the events of the disappearance of Kong Yanxi and the existence of Carefree Heavenly Sovereign. Unlike Lu San's shock, Fang Ziji remained exceptionally calm. He merely responded with a simple, "Oh," before once again focusing his gaze on the Medicine King True Cauldron. After a while, seeing that Li Fan had not left, he finally asked, "Sect Master, is there anything else?" Li Fan hesitated briefly before saying, "I intend to return to Kong Yanxi. However, since the calamity has only recently passed, I am uncertain about the current situation. There may still be hidden dangers, so I would like to ask you to accompany me." Fang Ziji's expression instantly brightened. He smirked smugly and said to Li Fan, "So, you finally understand who's truly reliable in critical moments, huh? That Lu San is nothing more than a short-sighted servant who got lucky. When real trouble arises, you still have to rely on me. Let's go. We'll set off immediately. With me here, you will be safe." Li Fan simply smiled and nodded without arguing. Without alerting the other members of Longevity Valley, Li Fan and Fang Ziji headed east, swiftly traveling toward Kong Yanxi. With Fang Ziji's assistance, they neared their destination in just over 10 days. However, upon entering Shilin Prefecture, Fang Ziji suddenly halted and cast a glance toward the neighboring Yuandao Prefecture, his expression turning serious. Strange. Fang Ziji furrowed his brows, then shook his head and muttered to himself. Li Fan's heart stirred, but he feigned surprise and asked, "Sir, what's the matter?" "I sensed a familiar aura," Fang Ziji explained. "A familiar aura? Could it be an old acquaintance?" Li Fan asked, astonished. "No, it seems like Heavenly Capital Purple Chi, but there's something slightly different about it." Fang Ziji observed the distant scene carefully before speaking again. "Heavenly Capital, That name sounds familiar, but I can't quite recall it. Li Fan followed Fang Ziji's gaze and pondered aloud. Fang Ziji chuckled, it's no surprise that you juniors don't know. Even Lu San might not have heard of the name Heavenly Capital. I only learned of it during my travels, when I explored with the direct disciples of the 10 great immortal sects. You must have heard of the Xuantian sect, right? Back then, the Xuantian sect was at its peak, dominating the Xuanlong realm. The so-called 10 great immortal sects were nothing more than its vassals, treated like mere cattle and horses. Under normal circumstances, we cultivators would never have had a chance to rise up. But one day, a surge of purple chi descended from the heavens, transforming into a massive, towering city that hovered in the sky. The Xuantian sect swiftly issued a decree forbidding anyone from approaching. But some cultivators, disregarding the risks, ventured inside. And that was the origin of the 10 great immortal sects. Is this truly the case? Each of the 10 great immortal sects is an unquestionable giant. What exactly exists within that colossal city in the sky that could give rise to such mighty immortal sects? Upon hearing this, Li Fan was visibly shocked, exclaiming in disbelief. Fang Ziji nodded slightly. When I first learned of this, I, too, found it hard to believe. However, after extensive inquiries, I have confirmed that this is indeed true. The 10 great immortal sects were able to rise so suddenly precisely because of the opportunities they obtained in Heavenly Capital. Before Li Fan could ask further, Fang Ziji continued, it is said that within Heavenly Capital, though it appears empty and devoid of any living beings, at the very center of a pavilion sits a solitary figure in meditation. Standing beside this figure is a child attendant. The figure's face is indistinct, yet it seems to be preaching to the void ahead. Countless profound and mystical Taoist discourses, resonant like grand bells and mighty drums, echo in the ears of all who hear them. What's even more astonishing is that each person hears something different. Entranced by the teachings, they immerse themselves completely. But when they awaken from their enlightenment and try to listen further, they find they can no longer hear anything from the figure. Instead, the child attendant beside the figure merely waves a hand and expels them from the pavilion. Upon leaving, these cultivators compared their insights and discovered that their revelations stemmed from their original knowledge, yet they had become exponentially more profound, countless times more exquisite than what their sects had taught them. Thereafter, no matter how hard they tried, they were never able to enter the pavilion again. Fang Ziji sighed slightly. These cultivators understood the immense value of this opportunity. As they quietly left Heavenly Capital, they informed their sect members to come. However, perhaps it was precisely this action that alerted the Xuantian sect. Not only did the sect begin hunting down those who had left Heavenly Capital, but it also sent its forces to completely seal off the floating city in the sky. This act of disrespect seemed to provoke the discontent of the mysterious figure within Heavenly Capital. The child attendant was sent to confront them. The details of this battle remain unknown, but the outcome was that although the Xuantian sect retreated in disgrace, no other cultivators could enter Heavenly Capital afterward either. However, from time to time each year, strands of purple chi would descend, dispersing across the Xuanlong realm. Those fortunate enough to obtain them, while not experiencing the figure's Taoist teachings firsthand, would still gain insights nearly as profound. Li Fan pondered for a moment, then frowned. What became of Heavenly Capital afterward? Why is it that in our time, so few have even heard of it? Heavenly Capital remained suspended in the sky for a full 10 years. Then, just as it had mysteriously appeared, it vanished without a trace, unnoticed by anyone. Not long after that, tensions between the Xuantian sect and the Immortal sects had escalated beyond reconciliation. Amidst the war that engulfed the entire Xuanlong realm, no one had the time to concern themselves with the vanished Heavenly Capital. Fang Ziji sighed. By the time of our generation, Heavenly Capital had already become nothing more than a legend spoken of in idle conversations. At that moment, realization dawned on Li Fan. I recall now, when I looked into the Tianshuan mirror, I once read about a Dao integration cultivator named Lan Yu from Yuan Dao Prefecture. He claimed to be a direct successor of the Grand Master of Heavenly Capital. However, a trace of doubt appeared on Li Fan's face. I have also heard that in ancient times, Heavenly Capital fell from the sky for some unknown reason. Even now, remnants of Heavenly Capital can still be found across the land. What? Heavenly Capital fell? This time, it was Fang Ziji's turn to be stunned. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. A moment later, Fang Ziji firmly denied this claim. If Heavenly Capital had truly collided with the Xuanlong realm, it's hard to say which would have suffered more. Sir, You mean to say? Li Fan narrowed his eyes. That's right. Heavenly capital very likely originates from the legendary immortal realm. And the mysterious figure within it could very well have been an actual immortal. The reason why the cultivators of the 10 great immortal sects were unable to perceive the figure clearly is that after ascending to immortality, one undergoes a fundamental transformation in the nature of existence, far beyond the comprehension of ordinary cultivators. Fang Ziji declared with conviction. Another immortal, so it did not fall after all. Li Fan neither confirmed nor denied it. He thought of the unknown entity hovering over Yuandao Prefecture, devouring time itself. Perhaps, some unforeseen event had indeed led to this bizarre phenomenon. Seeing Li Fan's skepticism, Fang Ziji snorted. You cannot understand the power of a true immortal unless you witness it with your own eyes. If you were fortunate enough to obtain even a single wisp of heavenly capital purple chi, like I did, you would know that my words are no exaggeration. By the way, that Lan Yu who claims to be from the lineage of the Grand Master of Heavenly Capital may not be lying. After all, the Heavenly Capital Purple Chi contains many inheritances from that Grand Master. Li Fan was slightly taken aback. Sir, you once obtained a wisp of Heavenly Capital Purple Chi. Fang Ziji smirked proudly. Of course, back then, I was just a naive child who stumbled upon this fortune without knowing its true origins. Otherwise, how could a nobody like me, without any sect or lineage, have cultivated to the Tao integration realm? And why would those arrogant disciples of the 10 great immortal sects even bother to mention this hidden past to me? They must have sensed the presence of Heavenly Capital Purple Chi within me. The so-called Grand Master of Heavenly Capital, could it be the figure within Heavenly Capital? Li Fan asked after a brief silence. Fang Ziji rolled his eyes. What are you thinking? I already told you, that figure was most likely a true immortal. If an immortal chooses not to reveal their identity, how could mere mortals ever know who they are? Moreover, even those cultivators of the 10 great immortal sects who had the privilege of listening to the immortals' teachings likely wouldn't dare to claim they had received the immortals' direct inheritance. The Grand Master of Heavenly Capital we refer to as actually the child attendant standing beside the figure. The 10 great immortal sects were founded after only briefly listening to the immortals' discourse. Can you imagine the level of mastery possessed by the Grand Master who stood beside the immortal for an eternity? The Heavenly Capital Purple Chi contains the Grand Master's interpretations of the immortals' teachings, encompassing countless disciplines. Even a single trace of it would be a lifelong treasure for a mortal. The wisp I obtained long ago contained only a fragment of the Grand Master's insights on artifact refinement. Fang Ziji glanced toward the direction of Yuandao Prefecture as he spoke. Li Fan finally understood. The 10 great immortal sects had received direct guidance from an immortal. The Heavenly Capital Purple Chi, however, contained the insights of the Grand Master of Heavenly Capital, who had spent years absorbing the immortals' teachings. Though this knowledge was a step removed from the source, it was still powerful enough to create a Tao integration cultivator with ease. This is the true abyss between mortals and immortals. The gap is even greater than that between mortals and cultivators, Li Fan sighed in his heart. If the Heavenly Capital truly fell, then what exists now must be a replica created by later generations as a tribute, said Fang Ziji. Although Li Fan nodded in agreement on the surface, he harbored his own thoughts deep within. Fang Ziji repeatedly claimed that the phantom in the Heavenly Capital held infinite mysteries and was undoubtedly a true immortal. However, from beginning to end, this matter exuded an eerie aura. For many years after the severance of the immortal path, a true immortal unexpectedly passed through the Xuanwang realm. Not only that, but this immortal willingly preached and imparted divine teachings to mere cultivators, who were nothing more than ants in his eyes. Ask yourself, how many cultivators, after passing by mortal cities, would benevolently descend and teach the mortals the ways of cultivation? More often than not, wouldn't they be like Shuo Feng, who, with a single careless sword strike, would massacre all the mortals without a second thought? For audacious cultivators who dared to intrude, merely being spared was already a mercy. Why, then, would such a being take the trouble to teach them? Moreover, if Fang Ziji's words were true, then there was something clearly wrong with the figure in the Heavenly Capital. His preaching might not have been intentional but rather an automatic occurrence. If that were the case, then the child standing beside that phantom, the so-called Grand Master of the Heavenly Capital, the only one who ever took action, would be highly suspicious. Perhaps this person was drawn in by the immortal ruins and was forced to descend into the Xuanwang realm. His actual strength might not even qualify as a true immortal. However, since the Xuantian sect failed to take the heavenly capital, he must have been incredibly powerful. At the very least, he was at the half-step true immortal stage, on par with the Xuantian king of the Xuantian sect. And allowing cultivators from the 10 great immortal sects to enter the heavenly capital might have just been a ploy to cause trouble for the Xuantian sect. After all, what truly concerns an immortal should be matters of their own level. Immortal spiritual energy. Almost instantly, Li Fan, as if he were a conspiracy theorist, constructed an elaborate scheme in his mind. Though his thoughts were purely speculative, one thing was nearly certain: the abnormalities in Yuandao Prefecture were undoubtedly connected to the heavenly capital. As a fellow inheritor of the heavenly capital's purple qi, sir, are you not interested in visiting Yuandao Prefecture? Li Fan asked tentatively. Fang Ziji shook his head repeatedly. Haha, I'd rather not. A Dao integration cultivator who has lived for thousands of years is far stronger than I am. If I go, wouldn't that be like walking into a tiger's den? Sect Master, let's stick to our real mission. Li Fan smiled slightly and nodded. After this brief detour, the two of them traveled for more than half a day before finally arriving at the border of Shilin Prefecture. However, the sight before them made Li Fan's pupils constrict. In the distance, the land had sunken, scorched black. Rivers of black molten lava flowed in all directions, radiating a post-apocalyptic atmosphere. From time to time, pillars of black flames would erupt from the depths of the earth, spreading through the air and distorting the atmosphere with their blistering heat. What truly made Li Fan's heart pound was the unsettling sight of countless pitch-black voids scattered irregularly across the ground and sky of this charred basin. Like a worm-eaten apple, the land was riddled with scars. Moreover, Li Fan soon realized that these dark voids were not completely static. Rather, they seemed to possess a life of their own, writhing slowly, or suddenly jumping to a different location, devouring everything within their reach. Even Fang Ziji, a Dao integration cultivator, looked grim in the face of such an eerie scene. Sect Master, are you sure we should proceed? He asked hesitantly. Li Fan did not respond immediately. Instead, he carefully observed for a long time. If we're careful, there shouldn't be a big problem. Those void caverns seem to shift unpredictably, but in reality, they follow a set pattern. They only teleport to relatively empty areas and will not appear near existing caverns. So, as long as we maintain a certain distance from the void caverns and keep moving forward, we should be fine. Besides, don't we still have the true cauldron of the Medicine King? As he spoke, Li Fan tossed the Medicine King cauldron toward a pitch-black void not far away. Sect Master, Fang Ziji exclaimed in a low voice. The Medicine King cauldron emitted an earthy yellow glow that enveloped itself. In the midst of the void, though the glow gradually dimmed, it still managed to persist for over 10 breaths of time. See, even if we accidentally enter, this amount of time would be more than enough for us to escape. Retrieving the Medicine King True Cauldron, Li Fan looked at Fang Ziji and said with a smile. Sect Master, you're far too reckless. What if something happened to the Medicine King True Cauldron? What then? Fang Ziji muttered. Isn't that why you're here? Even if the Medicine King Cauldron were lost, I believe you, sir, could refine a new one for our Medicine King sect. Li Fan replied nonchalantly. Hearing this, Fang Ziji couldn't help but smile and stopped nagging. He followed Li Fan, controlling the Medicine King Cauldron as they flew into the scorched basin. Li Fan carefully oriented himself and cautiously made his way toward the location in his memory. This is truly terrifying. How could such a catastrophe befall this once thriving sea? Fang Ziji clicked his tongue in amazement as he observed the surroundings. Back in our time, nothing like this ever happened. Judging by the situation, it seems the heavens intend to completely erase this place. Li Fan remained silent. Kangyan Sea had always been vast, and now, in order to avoid the ever-present void caverns, their flying speed was even more affected. It took them over 30 days before they finally arrived at the entrance of the small world of exotic beasts. However, the sight before them made Li Fan's expression darken. The original entrance had been completely consumed by the void. Naturally, the passageway itself no longer existed. Li Fan pondered for a moment and recalled that when Han Yi exited the small world, he had done so from another location. Thus, he set out for that spot. Fortunately, luck was on their side this time. The entrance was not within the range of the void caverns but was instead hidden beneath pitch-black lava. Sect Master, what if we enter and this exit gets swallowed by the void? Wouldn't that mean we'd have no way to return? Fang Ziji noticed the issue as well. Just as Li Fan was about to step in, he abruptly stopped him and voiced his concern. No worries, I've made preparations. As he spoke, Li Fan cleared away the black lava. Then, he retrieved a thin piece of paper from his storage ring and gently pressed it against the entrance of the small world. It was as if a drop of ink had fallen onto the paper, delicate patterns slowly emerged. This is. Fang Ziji squinted his eyes, momentarily unable to recognize it. This is a star-stealing lodging talisman. It can replicate and record the spatial node data of this passageway. Once inside the small world, we will perform the same process on the other end of the passage, allowing us to reconstruct a new pathway. Once the patterns on the stolen star lodging talisman had fully formed, Li Fan took out a gate-shaped talisman seal and tossed it onto the thin paper. Under the talisman's influence, a faintly glowing door emerged. Young master, the connection on this side is ready. From within the door, Lu San's voice could be faintly heard. With a gentle flick of his finger, Li Fan sent the star-stealing lodging talisman into the passage. Mr. Fang, let's go. Elder Lu will handle the preparations for the new passage in the Valley of Longevity. HMPH, you actually kept this from me, Fang Ziji muttered under his breath as he followed behind Li Fan into the spatial passage. Hiss. As soon as they stepped into this small world, Fang Ziji's vision blurred, and he saw dozens of green-winged flying serpents bearing their fangs, lunging toward him. You beasts dare to attack me? His expression darkened as he waved his wide sleeve. Instantly, the space in front of him trembled, and the ferocious beasts were reduced to dust, leaving no remains. The entrance was located at the bottom of a deep ravine, shrouded in mist, with faint traces of spiritual energy dispersing into the air. The disturbance caused by Li Fan and Fang Ziji's arrival quickly drew the attention of countless beasts above. Like waves of an unending tide, they charged forward fearlessly. Sir, please protect me while I work. Despite their overwhelming numbers, these beasts were at most at the Foundation establishment stage, posing no real threat to Fang Ziji, who had reached the Dao integration realm. Li Fan smiled, spoke briefly, then took out a star-stealing lodging talisman and placed it at the passage entrance. In no time, after completing the transcription of this spatial node, Li Fan sent the talisman to Lu San, who was preparing inside the Longevity Valley. Young master, constructing the spatial passage will take approximately 30 days. Will you return first, or? Lu San's voice faintly echoed through the gateway. No rush, I will explore this place with Mr. Fang first. With him here, Elder Lu, you need not worry about my safety, Li Fan replied. HMPH, it's exactly because you're with him that I am worried. What did you say? Fang Ziji, still clearing out the beasts, suddenly turned around upon hearing this. Just as he was about to argue with Lu San, he realized the connection had already been cut off. Feeling stifled, Fang Ziji could only vent his frustration on the reckless beasts. Before long, the creatures that had lived in this ravine for countless generations were slaughtered to near extinction. Flying out of the gorge, Li Fan landed on a desolate plain. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused. The black bird feather within him emitted a faint black glow. In an instant, he became aware of the omnipresent, free-flowing heavenly fortune within this small world. Like a whale drawing in water, like leaves returning to their roots, without much effort, the heavenly fortune from hundreds of miles around surged eagerly into Li Fan's body. Or rather, into the black bird feather. As he absorbed more and more of this power, Li Fan felt a shift within himself. With a mere flick of his finger and a thought, a massive rift split the ground with a thunderous roar. Countless plants and beasts were swallowed by the crevice, while those that survived let out terrified howls. No longer caring about this sudden intruder, they frantically tried to flee. Watching the beasts retreat, Li Fan stirred his thoughts, and suddenly, fierce winds swept through the heavens and the earth. Sand and stones rose into the air, howling as they lifted the fleeing beasts into the sky, only to hurl them back to where they started. These creatures, already lacking in intelligence, were completely overwhelmed by terror. Trembling, they collapsed to the ground. Satisfied, Li Fan withdrew his power. My fortune is the heavenly fortune, my fate is the heavenly fate. Every word and deed carries the might of heaven and earth. Marvelous, he thought to himself in admiration. Sect Master, was that all you're doing? Fang Ziji asked in shock. Even with his Dao integration cultivation, effortlessly splitting the earth and summoning stormwinds was no easy feat. Li Fan simply smiled without answering. For the next period of time, under Fang Ziji's protection, Li Fan continued gathering the free-flowing heavenly fortune within this world while making his way deeper into the wilderness. If the blackbird feather's faint guidance was correct, then Xiaohei's remains should be there. During this journey, Li Fan discovered something rather intriguing. The closer they got to Xiaohei's corpse, the fewer human-like external features the beasts had. At the same time, these beasts became significantly stronger. The beasts in this small world belong to a branch of hybridized beastkind that fuses humans and beasts. However, after thousands of years of reproduction across countless generations, the beastly bloodline has not weakened. Instead, it has exhibited an atavistic phenomenon. Interesting. As Fang Ziji cleared a path forward, Li Fan also noticed that some of these beasts had actually mastered various spells that allowed them to utilize the free-flowing heavenly fortune for combat. This somewhat hindered Li Fan's ability to absorb heavenly fortune, but it was merely an inconvenience. No matter what kind of divine abilities or mystical arts these beasts possessed, in the face of absolute power disparity, all of them were meaningless, they would all be crushed. Fang Ziji advanced relentlessly, while Li Fan leisurely followed behind, harvesting the remains. Mr. Fang, go easy on them. Leave some of the beasts alive. This place could make a fine ranch for our Medicine King sect in the future. Holding a blue crystal core in his hand, Li Fan examined it carefully while giving his instructions. Whatever you say, sect master. The prolonged slaughter had made Fang Ziji somewhat impatient. Now that Li Fan had spoken, he could rightfully slack off a bit, so he readily agreed. This blue crystal core was something Li Fan had discovered within the corpse of a beast at the golden core stage. It was identical to the beast cores described by Li Chenfeng, beast cores that the Empire's cultivators relied on for cultivation. Crushing the core, a surge of boiling hot energy gushed forth like scalding water. As Li Fan absorbed it, he noticed that part of this searing, unfamiliar energy transformed into spiritual qi, flowing through his meridians. Another small portion dispersed into his physical body in tiny specks, strengthening his flesh and enhancing its resilience. Not bad, this is good stuff. Li Fan thought to himself. At this moment, Fang Ziji also noticed Li Fan's actions. Casually slaughtering another beast, he retrieved a crystal core and absorbed it. Interesting, back in the day, we cultivators couldn't absorb these demon cores. I never expected that after thousands of years, they would become usable to us. After a brief moment, Fang Ziji sighed. Indeed, the world has changed over these millennia. Li Fan laughed in agreement. Perhaps this is precisely due to the fusion of demon beast and human bloodlines over the past thousands of years. Li Fan thought to himself, recalling those beastkind that looked nearly identical to humans. Continuing forward, they saw a towering black three-legged pagoda standing on the distant land. At its peak, a massive black bird stood with its wings outstretched. So it really is that thing. A glimmer of sharpness flashed in Li Fan's eyes. The black bird's appearance was exactly the same as the Xiaohei he had encountered in the fallen immortal realm. As if sensing that Fang Ziji's power was utterly unstoppable, the beasts no longer attempted to hinder their approach. Li Fan could only watch as thousands upon thousands of beasts knelt beneath the black three-legged pagoda, bowing their heads in reverence toward the black bird, as if pleading for mercy. In Li Fan's field of vision, under the worship ceremony of the exotic beasts, the drifting heavenly fate in the depths of the wilderness began to madly converge toward the top of the black three-legged tower. Like a massive storm vortex, lightning flashed and thunder roared, making the sky darken ominously. Seeing this, Li Fan attempted to use the feather of the black bird to seize control of the heavenly fate. However, the outcome was clear, it was utterly futile. Compared to a mere feather, the black mysterious bird perched at the top of the three-legged tower was the true ruler of this beast race world. Under that immense suction force, Li Fan even faintly sensed that the strands of drifting heavenly fortune he had previously absorbed into his body were beginning to loosen and show signs of being forcibly drawn away. Although Fang Ziji could not see the changes in heavenly fate, the increasingly lifelike appearance of the black mysterious bird was visible to the naked eye. A solemn look flickered across his face, but he remained disdainful. The dead are dead, do you really think bowing and begging will bring them back to life? Despite his words, Fang Ziji remained extremely cautious. Without waiting for the beasts to complete their ceremony, he conjured a towering giant hand, gripping a massive gray-black hammer, and violently smashed it toward the black bird atop the tower. Buzz! The colossal hammer filled the sky, making even the towering three-legged tower seem like nothing more than a toy. As the hammer descended, a piercing boom erupted. It was as if, in the next moment, the black three-legged pagoda and the thousands of exotic beasts below would be completely obliterated by the sheer force of the hammer. However, at that very instant, a bolt of lightning suddenly struck from the sky, smashing into the gray hammer. The hammer momentarily paused midair, and then dozens of massive lightning bolts, each as thick as a water bucket, rained down. With each strike, the hammer's form shrank slightly. In just a brief moment, the once mountainous hammer had diminished to the size of an ordinary human tool. As the lightning struck the tower's peak, Fang Ziji's expression subtly changed, not merely because the hammer was attacked, but because the very space around him underwent a cataclysmic shift. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, thick and heavy, as if they could drip water. A yellow demonic wind howled, its razor-sharp edges slicing through the earth like sentient blades, all converging toward Fang Ziji. Beneath his feet, violent earth fire erupted, like a furious dragon roaring to consume him. Chains of golden talismanic script emerged from the void without warning, coiling tightly around his limbs. Overhead, black lightning continued to flash. It was as if the entire beast race world had declared him its mortal enemy. Wind, fire, thunder, lightning, every force in existence, under the decree of fate, launched an unrelenting assault upon him. "Young master, stay back for now," Fang Ziji said seriously, tossing out a cyan bell that shielded Li Fan, who had already retreated to a safe distance. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out 36 willow leaf-shaped flying blades. The emerald green blades danced with extraordinary agility, as if they were alive. In an instant, they surrounded Fang Ziji, effortlessly deflecting the raging wind, fire, and lightning. With a composed expression, Fang Ziji strode toward the spire of the pagoda. The golden chains wrapped around him tightened instantly, attempting to restrain him. Yet, his steps remained firm. After just a moment of resistance, cracks began to form in the space where the chains were anchored. The chains stretched longer and longer. Ultimately, they could no longer withstand the force and shattered piece by piece, scattering golden light across the sky. The entire world stands against him. This is the ultimate form of the formless killing intent. But even so, it cannot harm Fang Ziji in the slightest. After all, this world is inherently weaker. No matter how fiercely it resists, it cannot contend against a Dao integration-level powerhouse from another realm, Li Fan thought calmly as he observed from within the protective bell. Fang Ziji drew closer to the black three-legged pagoda, and the exotic beasts that had been bowing in worship gradually lost their composure. Some, overwhelmed with fear, prostrated themselves even more fervently. Others, in blind panic, attempted to flee, only to be instantly executed by the leader-like beasts. Still, some, with reckless determination, charged at Fang Ziji without regard for their lives, hoping to sacrifice themselves in a desperate attempt to exhaust this terrifying invader. But their fate was already sealed. The power gap between the two sides was too vast. When Fang Ziji finally stood atop the three-legged pagoda, looking down at the trembling, kneeling beasts below, he felt an overwhelming sense of boredom. "How dull," he snorted coldly before summoning Li Fan from the distance. "Sect Master, is this the thing you were looking for?" Fang Ziji asked. Without the support of the exotic beast's ritual, the black bird's projection at the pagoda's peak returned to its original form. It was merely the projection of a black bird statue. The vast amount of drifting heavenly fate that had gathered above the tower, now unrestrained, began to scatter like flowing water toward the corners of the world. Standing before the small black statue, Li Fan lifted his head and gazed at it. At the same time, he activated the divine ability Heaven's Mandate as mine, using the black bird's feather to frantically absorb the drifting heavenly fortune. Like 100 rivers converging into the sea, the process of absorbing heavenly fortune was astonishingly smooth. There was almost no resistance, and in less than half a day, Li Fan had completely drained the accumulated heavenly fortune in this place. The effect was immediate. With the three-legged pagoda as the center, within a radius of several thousand miles, every movement of the wind and grass was instantly perceivable to Li Fan with just a thought. Moreover, within this area, Li Fan nearly achieved the ability to replace heaven itself. Sunshine or storm, wind or rain, everything was under his control with a single thought. After closing his eyes and searching for a moment, Li Fan furrowed his brows slightly. He realized that Xiao Hei's remains were not here. The reason the beasts had been able to manipulate fate through their rituals was merely because the statue had been imbued with a trace of Xiao Hei's divine authority. No matter. As long as I remain in this minor world, I will find it sooner or later. Li Fan did not mind. In the following days, Li Fan and Fang Ziji traveled across the beast realm. Everywhere they went, the beasts had no power to resist and submitted one after another. Any lingering thoughts of defiance quickly vanished when a new passageway was established, and Lu San led the main forces of the Medicine King sect into the realm. Young master, you've really found a great place this time. I was just worrying that Longevity Valley was too small for the disciples to train in. Lu San scanned the beast realm with his divine sense and nodded in satisfaction. Most of these beasts are too weak to be of any real use, but they can still help with farming and managing the spiritual fields. The slightly stronger ones would make decent guards. This plan is feasible. Once I refine a batch of beast-controlling rings, we won't have to worry about these creatures going out of control. With just a few casual remarks from the two Dao integration cultivators, the fate of the beast realm's creatures was already decided. With the disciples of the Medicine King sect joining the management, Li Fan no longer had to worry too much. After spending a month absorbing all the drifting heavenly fortune of the beast-skinned realm, he finally reached a qualitative transformation. Within the feathers of the black bird, a faint image of a newly hatched chick, its feathers not yet grown, could be seen. It bore some resemblance to Xiaohe when it was young, yet there were also differences. Li Fan closed his eyes, and in the next moment, the entire beast-skinned realm appeared before him like a sphere of glowing mist. He could instantly perceive every detail of the realm with perfect clarity. However, he also noticed that around the two Dao integration experts, Fang Ziji and Lu San, there were distortions in the light and shadow, making the area unclear. And this was despite the fact that the two had noticed Li Fan's gaze and had not actively attempted to block it. In the Xuanwang world, the influence of a Dao integration expert can span nearly an entire province. But in this small world, a Dao integration cultivator can already rival the world itself. This is a natural difference in levels, Li Fan grasped in realization. With a mere thought, he stepped forward, instantly crossing 10,000 miles to arrive at a clear spring atop a mountain peak. Previously, when he and Fang Ziji had swept through the beast-skinned realm, they had passed by this mountain. Yet, surprisingly, they had not noticed the pool at its summit. It was only after Li Fan had fully mastered the world's heavenly fate that he became aware of the anomaly here. By the pool, there was a wooden hut. Li Fan pushed open the wooden door and stepped inside. Inside the room, a black bird with feathers that had lost their luster stood proudly. Though it still looked majestic, it no longer carried the breath of life. Xiaohe. Li Fan instantly recognized the black bird. So, it has died of old age. After observing for a while, Li Fan murmured to himself. Even though its lifespan was far longer than that of a cultivator, this heavenly fate black bird had ultimately reached the end of its life, having lived since ancient times. However, Li Fan soon noticed something unusual. By all logic, Xiaoqing had lived in the same era as Xiaohe, yet Qingluan birds were far weaker than heavenly fate black birds. Moreover, Xiaohe had fused with the heavenly fate of this world. There was no reason why Xiaoqing was still alive while Xiaohe had perished first. Could it be that Xiaohe exhausted its lifespan for some reason? Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Activating the divine ability, Heaven's Mandate as mine, he shielded himself with the domain of heavenly fate and gently touched the Zon bird's corpse. Whoosh! Like a breeze, Xiaohe's body instantly disintegrated into countless tiny particles, scattering into the air. At the same time, countless blurry images flashed through Li Fan's mind. At first, the events mirrored what he had experienced in the fallen immortal realm. Growing up joyfully alongside Shu Ke in the beast-taming sect, encountering Mr. Bai who intruded into the sect, and later being sent to the sacred beast mountain of the Nanming. Ultimately, Xiaohe had failed the heart-linking ring trial and was exiled here by Emperor Sanmo. The difference was that, in the real timeline, Xiaohe had missed the opportunity to meet Mr. Bai. Without the true profound art of creation, upon arriving in this small world, it could only cultivate using the divine abilities inherited through its bloodline. Even after countless years, it barely managed to attain the Heaven's Mandate as mine divine ability, but it had already become bound to the fate of this world. Leaving this world was not impossible, but it came at an extremely steep price. However, as long as one did not frequently leave their origin world, or replenish themselves with heavenly fate upon returning, it was not easy to suffer fatal damage. Yet, Xiaohe had chosen to do just that. And the reason was, Li Fan sifted through and examined Xiaohe's memories from after it arrived in the beast-skinned realm. At the beginning, in order to prevent Xiaohe from feeling lonely, Shu Ke would frequently send messages, sharing his experiences and observations. Xiaohe, do you know how thrilling and dangerous this journey has been? We've encountered countless strange small worlds and were even hunted by demonic beasts. At first, we thought someone had leaked information. But later, we realized it was just our bad luck. We ran into a group of demonic beasts that, for some unknown reason, also appeared in the small world. We struck first, but in the end, one of the beasts managed to escape, exposing our retreat. Luckily, we're almost at our destination. Xiao He. Do you still remember Mr. Bai? I originally thought he was already incredibly powerful, but I didn't expect him to be even stronger than I imagined. My senior brothers and I were sent to explore a small world, but unexpectedly, we encountered a terrifying monster. It had 9 heads, a colossal body lying across the sky. Every time it opened its mouth, it seemed as if it could tear apart and devour a portion of the world. I thought I was doomed. That I would never see you again, Xiao He. But before I left the Xuanwang realm, senior brother Luya gave me a red string woven by Mr. Bai. Just as that 9-headed monster fixed its gaze on me, a thin thread suddenly shot out from the red string. Before I could even react, the red thread slashed through the air like a sharp sword, instantly cutting off 6 of the monster's heads. And the red string didn't stop there, it forcibly dragged the beast down from the sky. I was completely stunned. Mr. Bai is truly incredible. Xiao He, I have received an extremely important mission. I may not be able to contact you for a long time. I'm really sorry, but don't worry, I'll come back once it's over. Xiao He, tell me, why is it that cultivators were originally humans too, yet once they step onto the path of cultivation, they become so ruthless toward their own kind? Scenes flashed rapidly before Li Fan's eyes. He now knew that Shu Ke had once come to this beast realm and met Xiao He. At that time, Shu Ke had already grown into a refined and heroic young man. Master and beast companion reunited, sitting by the clear pond atop the mountain, chatting for a long time. But in the end, Shu Ke came in a hurry and left just as quickly. Xiao He originally wanted to follow Shu Ke, but at the time, the restrictions set by Emperor Sanmo were still in place. Moreover, Shu Ke had said that great upheavals were occurring in the outside world, and if Xiao He left with him, it might be dangerous. So, Shu Ke told Xiao He to wait here until the time was right, he would come back to take him away. After their farewell, they communicated a few more times. However, the intervals between their conversations grew longer and longer. Through the tone of Shu Ke's messages, one could witness his growth. Until one day, Xiao He suddenly lost all sense of Shu Ke. As Shu Ke's companion beast, even though their master-servant bond had faded, a profound connection still existed between them. No matter how many millions of miles apart they were, even across multiple worlds. Xiao He could always faintly sense Shu Ke's existence. But now, for that connection to completely disappear, there was only one possibility. Shu Ke was dead. As the heavenly fate Black Bird, Xiao He was naturally well aware of how extraordinary Shu Ke's fortune was. A purple gold fortune, 1 in a billion. No matter where he went, he could turn misfortune into blessings, transform crises into opportunities, and effortlessly obtain countless treasures and opportunities. How could someone like him possibly die so easily? Of course, destiny is not omnipotent. Possessing great fortune does not mean one is immortal. If an individual encounters a calamity beyond what their fate can withstand, they still face the risk of perishing. However, aside from his own formidable destiny, Shu Ke also had the red string protection of Mr. Bai. Even a single strand from that red string was capable of severely injuring a top-tier powerhouse from the Demon Beast clan, Red 9-headed. The sheer might of Mr. Bai was simply unimaginable. From his last conversation with Shu Ke, Xiao He learned that there were still some remnants of that red string on Shu Ke's wrist. Xiao He firmly believed that, no matter what dangers Shu Ke encountered in the Xuanwang realm, the remaining red string should have been enough to help him escape alive. Therefore, Shu Ke's inexplicable death was something Xiao He simply could not understand or accept. He vowed to uncover the truth behind Shu Ke's demise. When the seal placed by Emperor Sanmo weakened, Xiao He forcibly broke free from the restrictions of the beast realm, disregarding the shackles this world had imposed upon him. He sought to retrace Shu Ke's life path and investigate the mystery surrounding his death. The Xuanwang realm was vast, filled with innumerable subsidiary worlds. Trying to piece together the truth from mere fragments of past events was an incredibly difficult task. However, as the heavenly fate Black Bird, Xiao He had once been Shu Ke's companion, bound by fate's unseen threads. After spending 1,000 years searching, a chance encounter finally led him to an expansive minor world, a place where a massive floating corpse of red nine-headed lay suspended in the sky. At that moment, Xiao He knew he had found the right place. Upon meeting an old acquaintance, the azure Luan bird, Xiao He finally learned the full story. After escaping, the beast-taming sect found refuge in a minor world known as the Lingshu realm. There, they experienced a period of relative stability. Though the spiritual energy in Lingshu was weaker than in the Xuanwang realm, it was still sufficient to sustain their disciples. However, due to the lingering restriction on practicing multiple cultivation paths, the sect devised a dual strategy for the future. Due to the continued restriction of incompatibility of cultivation techniques, the beast-taming sect devised two parallel future plans. The first was to gather the most talented disciples within the sect and have the sect leader and elders teach them everything they had learned in their lives, hoping that this group could eventually develop new cultivation techniques for the sect's members to practice. The second was to research a method that would allow disciples to establish a mental connection with beasts even without practicing the true beast-taming technique. Although Shu Ke lacked talent in comprehending Tao, he possessed an innate affinity with spirit beasts. Following the sect master's guidance, he joined the group researching new methods of beast taming. Day after day, he immersed himself in studying the sect's sacred artifact, the 10,000 reincarnation beast wheel, losing himself in the pursuit of knowledge, unaware of time's passage. One day, however, he received shocking news: his senior brother, Lu Ya, had suffered severe injuries and fallen into a coma. Despite everyone's objections, Shu Ke secretly returned alone to the Xuanwang realm. At that time, a terrifying miasma had begun to spread from mortal bodies, engulfing the entire cultivation world. Upon his return, Shu Ke, too, became infected. Fortunately, his luck held, and he inexplicably recovered after 7 days. At the same time, the dying Lu Ya suddenly regained consciousness, his complexion returning to a healthy glow. However, Shu Ke knew it was nothing more than a final burst of energy before death. Grief overwhelmed him. Lu Ya, however, remained serene. Dismissing everyone else, he called Shu Ke to his bedside. That night, no one knew what the two of them talked about. From that moment on, Shu Ke remained in the ruins of the beast-taming sect in the Xuanwang realm. When the Great Migration Plan was later initiated, he became the sole representative of the sect, tasked with relocating countless mortals to the spirit-devoid small world. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. The final group of mortals was sent to the very minor world where Shu Ke had once encountered Red Nine-Headed. Having completed his mission, Shu Ke never returned to the beast-taming sect in the Lingshu realm. Instead, he deliberately severed all ties, hiding his identity and choosing to live among mortals. Of course, this did not mean he lived as an ordinary mortal. Without those around him realizing it, Shu Ke used the 6 severed heads of Red Nine-Headed, which had fallen into this world, as incubators. He combined them with gentler beast species he had brought from the beast-taming sect, breeding and cultivating various mutant spirit beasts. His 2 loyal avian companions, Xiaoqing and Xiao Hong, never understood his true intentions. Yet, they assisted him, meticulously recording all his research findings. Over the generations, the number and variety of mutant spirit beasts grew exponentially. Though these mutant creatures were weaker than their original counterparts, their innate aggression had diminished. At the very least, they no longer attacked humans indiscriminately. Many years passed, and the world witnessed an explosion of new exotic beast species. Then, one day, Red Nine-Headed reappeared, without warning. It seemed to still be haunted by lingering fear, lying atop the firmament and observing for a long time. Only after confirming that there were no threats did it finally relax. Accompanying it was a brown great pung. Both creatures looked extremely battered, with multiple scorch marks covering their bodies. If I had known earlier, I would have left with Lord De. There was no need to suffer this humiliation in the Xuanwang realm. Without the great leadership of Lord De, we demon beasts have indeed declined year after year. Originally, we thought that after the great catastrophe descended, humanity would soon be wiped out. But unexpectedly, powerful figures keep emerging one after another. This is simply unjust. That guy from the Purple Heaven sect is alright, not too outrageous. Speaking of true powerhouses, back in the day, I was right here. Tisk tisk, the scars on my head still ache from time to time. The 2 fearsome demon beasts conversed freely in the sky, treating the many mortals of this world as nothing more than livestock to replenish their blood and vitality. Heh, Big brother, don't take it to heart. Once we devour this realm and restore our strength, we'll go and settle the score with those people. The great Peng's eyes were fixed on the shivering mortals below, its saliva nearly dripping. However, among demon beasts, hierarchy was strict. Big brother, please go first. The great Peng forcibly suppressed its hunger and flattered its companion. Red Nine-Headed let out a cold snort, and in an instant, its body expanded once more. Its 3 remaining heads opened their enormous bloodthirsty mouths, ready to swallow this entire world. But at that very moment, it caught sight of that familiar streak of red once again. How is this possible? This time, Red Nine-Headed was not as lucky as before. Threads of silk directly pierced through its body, dragging it down from beyond the world. Seeing its elder brother being slain in an instant, the great Peng was so terrified that its soul nearly shattered. No longer caring about any bonds of kinship, it transformed into a streak of black light and fled in panic. The mortals, whose eyes could not perceive the full extent of what had transpired, only saw the 2 ferocious demon beasts about to commit atrocities, only to be slain by an immortal at the last moment. Rejoicing in their miraculous survival, they erupted into cheers, chanting praises of the immortal's divine grace and power. Only Shu Ke, standing among the crowd, silently caressed the now noticeably thinner red string around his wrist, saying nothing. The corpse of Red Nine-Headed came at the perfect time to resolve Shu Ke's urgent dilemma. With the increasing variety and number of exotic beasts, the 6 original heads used as breeding vessels had gradually been depleted. Red Nine-Headed, despite being a single entity, possessed 9 heads, each with a distinct personality. Perhaps it was precisely this unique biological trait that allowed the exotic beasts cultivated from it to evolve in countless different directions. If the breeding materials had been replaced with other equivalent demon beasts, such as that brown Peng, it might not have produced the same effect. Thus, the arrival of Red Nine-Headed was incredibly timely. According to Shu Ke's calculations, once the number of existing exotic beast species reached a certain threshold, even without the flesh and blood of Red Nine-Headed, the sheer vastness of their population would be sufficient to sustain their self-propagation and evolution. With that in mind, Shu Ke shifted his focus to how to control these exotic beasts. Since most of the world's exotic beasts had been cultivated from Red Nine-Headed's flesh and blood, and given his past research on the 10,000 Beasts reincarnation wheel, Shu Ke, after several generations of mortal lifetimes, finally devised the unified heart technique, an advanced method of communication and control based on insights from the ancient text True Beast Taming Technique. After Shu Ke imparted this technique to the mortal tribes of this world, humans quickly established complete dominion over the land by commanding the countless exotic beasts within it. In doing so, they founded a vast human empire. Shu Ke was revered by the mortals as the Holy Emperor, while Shao Qing and Shao Hong, his 2 lifelong companions, were honored as the Holy Masters. However, despite being exalted as an emperor, Shu Ke showed little interest in the mundane affairs of mortals. He delegated authority, allowing humanity to govern itself. As for himself, he became increasingly reclusive, engaged in mysterious endeavors that even Shao Qing and Shao Hong knew nothing about. Then, one day, Shu Ke unexpectedly brought a young boy before them. He claimed that this was his descendant, created through his research on the gift left by the ancient being Di. He had developed a technique known as the Holy Blood Embryo Transformation, allowing him to generate offspring from his refined blood essence. The Holy Blood Embryo Transformation was a technique that converted a portion of one's own blood essence into an embryo capable of inheriting the majority of the creator's memories. This embryo required no maternal womb, only sufficient nourishment, and could mature into a human child in just 7 days. Moreover, both physical strength and intelligence would develop to an exceptionally high level. Staring at the unfamiliar yet eerily familiar child, Shao Qing and Shao Hong felt a sense of unease creeping into their hearts. Their premonition was correct. Shu Ke instructed them not to interfere with human affairs unless the empire faced an existential crisis. As for the holy embryo, bearing his bloodline, it would only serve as a puppet emperor. After leaving these final instructions, Shu Ke abruptly departed. He disclosed nothing about his destination and vanished without a trace. Until today, many years later, Shao He appeared at their doorstep. By then, Shu Ke's aura had completely vanished, a fact Shao Qing and Shao Hong had already sensed. Faced with Shao He's furious accusations, the 2 could only remain silent, bearing the weight of her anger. But after venting, Shao He calmed down. He knew Shu Ke well, his carefree yet stubborn nature. Once he made a decision, not even Shao Qing or Shao Hong could change it. When he saw his descendants, the holy embryo, now self-propagating through more than a dozen generations, Xiaohe felt a deep sense of disappointment. Though traces of Shu Kei's presence still lingered in them, even their aura faintly resembled his. But it was not Shu Kei. Without a word, Xiaohe turned and left the empire, never to return. For years, Xiaohe wandered through countless minor worlds, tirelessly searching for the true cause of Shu Kei's disappearance. But in the end, he found nothing. His years of roaming beyond the primordial world had drained his lifespan at an alarming rate. As his final moments approached, Xiaohe returned to the last place where he had seen Shu Kei. There, lost in memories, he silently awaited death. Xiaohe's body completely turned to dust, scattering into the heavens and earth. Meanwhile, the image of Xiaohe on the black bird feather within Li Fan's body grew increasingly vivid. Xiaohe once merged with the world of the beast realm. Although he perished when his lifespan ended, by gathering the remnants of his drifting fate and using this feather from his own body. Perhaps a form of rebirth could be achieved. However, even if it succeeds, this Xiaohe will no longer be the same as before. Li Fan shook his head slightly. Leaving the wooden house, he arrived at the clear pool atop the mountain peak. Raising his right hand, in the next moment, a brown jade bottle containing several grams of vital blood flew out from beneath the water, landing in Li Fan's palm. The bottle was sealed with several layers of restrictions set by Xiaohe, preserving the blood's vitality even after thousands of years. There's no rush. I should first uncover the mysteries of Han Yi's statue. After a moment of contemplation, Li Fan put away the jade bottle. With a single step, he returned to the black three-legged pagoda. Through his perception, he noticed the disciples of the Medicine King sect busy in various corners of the beast realm. Judging by their movements, they seemed to be engraving a formation onto the land. Elder Lu, what are you all working on? After carefully observing for a while but failing to recognize the formation, Li Fan asked curiously. Hey, this was my idea. Before Lu San could respond, Fang Ziji hurriedly spoke up to claim credit. This world, while vast enough for our disciples to relax and train, has spiritual energy that is far too thin, making long-term cultivation difficult. On the other hand, the Longevity Valley is rich in spiritual energy. So, we are planning to transfer some of the spiritual energy from Longevity Valley to this place, of course, only on the condition that it does not affect the valley's medicinal herbs. Lu San then added, for safety, I have already ordered the disciples to investigate whether any other passageways exist. If any are found, Old Fang and I will seal them off together. This way, the only entrance from the outside world will be through Longevity Valley. And if Longevity Valley ever comes under attack and we are unable to resist, we can simply reopen the passage and retreat with ease. With this, the safety of our Medicine King sect will be fully assured. Lu San explained proudly, thank you both for your efforts. Hearing this, Li Fan revealed a satisfied expression and nodded approvingly. After entrusting Lu San and Fang Ziji with the task of managing the connection between Longevity Valley and the Beast Realm, Li Fan took the black bird feather infused with the fate of a small world. He once again approached Han Yi's stone statue. As he felt an immense suction force coming from the statue, Li Fan focused his mind. Streams of fortune surged from the black bird feather, counteracting the suction force. At the same time, he pushed his speed to the limit and flew rapidly toward Han Yi. With every inch he advanced, the suction force drawing in his fate grew stronger. The world's heavenly fate stored within the black bird feather gushed out uncontrollably, like a flood bursting through a dam, making Li Fan's expression change slightly. The terrifying fortune-draining ability of Han Yi's stone statue exceeded his expectations. If it were an ordinary cultivator, they would likely be drained of all their fortune in an instant, bringing calamity upon themselves and dying on the spot. Even someone as blessed with fortune as Shu Kei would struggle to last long here. However, an individual's fortune alone was indeed incapable of sustaining itself within this fortune-absorbing domain. But the fate of an entire world, now, that was a different story. After all, the stone statue had a limit to how quickly it could absorb fortune. Even as Li Fan rapidly approached its side, the amount of fortune being drained each moment was nothing compared to the immense reserves stored within the black bird feather, merely a drop in the ocean. By Li Fan's estimation, even if he remained stationary and allowed the statue to absorb his fortune freely, it would still take at least half a day to fully deplete it. This is what is meant by, divine powers cannot overcome heavenly fate. Once again drawing upon the world's heavenly fate stored within the blackbird feather, Li Fan enveloped himself in a protective barrier, ensuring his absolute safety before quietly observing the Han Yi stone statue before him. Its face was frozen in terror, eyes filled with despair, so lifelike, as if time itself had stopped at the very moment it suffered a fatal blow. Han Yi must have encountered the fisherman before ending up like this. Was it the fisherman's doing, or the effect of the Heavenly Fortune Sutra? Li Fan did not act recklessly but instead carefully analyzed the situation. Neither alive nor dead, something is strange about this. Previously, through the Cloud Water Dream Art, Li Fan had gained a general understanding of the Heavenly Fortune Sutra. However, none of its recorded techniques described such an eerie transformation. If anything came close, it would be a divine ability known as severing fortune, return to the pivot. This technique allowed one to sever their own fortune in moments of life-threatening danger, completely cutting off all ties to the world and entering an realm of the pivot, where there is no space and no self. In this state, one's body and mind would completely stagnate, as if they had escaped into the void itself, making them undetectable by others. The state of returning to the pivot may last anywhere from several months to several years, only gradually restoring itself once all external threats had passed. It was a technique with severe side effects but also unparalleled survival potential. Perhaps the fisherman's attack interacted with severing fortune, return to the pivot leading to the creation of this stone statue. After a long period of contemplation, Li Fan came to a realization. Although Han Yi activated this life-preserving divine ability, the power gap between him and the fisherman was simply too vast. He didn't even have time to fully enter the returning to pivot state before he was struck by the fisherman's technique. The fisherman likely had no intention of killing Han Yi. He was merely searching for clues regarding the heavenly calamity stored within Han Yi's mind. But even so, Han Yi couldn't endure it. The sheer force of the attack engulfed him, turning him into this stone-like state. Severing fortune means returning one's fortune to the heavens, essentially forsaking it. But now, this state has transformed into one that absorbs fortune from the outside world instead. Is this due to the fisherman's attack? Li Fan's thoughts raced, his expression turning serious. After a while, he emerged from his deep contemplation and gazed at Han Yi's frozen figure, his eyes cold. If this were a normal return to pivot state, you would eventually wake up one day. But with the fisherman's interference, in your current condition, you will never return to normal again. A fate worse than death. Let me put you out of your misery. As he spoke, Li Fan pointed a finger in midair and cast the purple heaven soul viewing technique on Han Yi. At this moment, Han Yi's thoughts were in absolute stasis. Because of this, Li Fan faced no resistance as he roamed freely through Han Yi's mind. Every secret, even the darkest corners of Han Yi's heart, were laid bare before Li Fan. It could be said that at this moment, Li Fan understood Han Yi better than Han Yi himself. After extracting every single thought from Han Yi's mind, Li Fan flicked his finger, releasing a streak of pitch-black sword light. The dark sword light swiftly pierced through the statue's chest. In an instant, the statue disintegrated into countless tiny particles, scattering into the heavens and earth. At the same time, the fortune-draining domain that had enveloped the statue vanished without a trace. Rather than any ominous signs appearing in the sky due to a cultivator's fall, an invisible storm instead surged in place. The fortune energy that Han Yi had absorbed over time also returned to the heaven and earth following Han Yi's demise. Li Fan would not let such a rare opportunity slip by. He immediately activated the blackbird feather, seizing the moment before this unclaimed fortune completely dispersed and devoured it all. Then, before anyone could notice the anomaly in this place, he quietly disappeared. Returning to Longevity Valley, he did not disturb Lu San and the others, who were still busy. Li Fan entered the sect master's secluded cultivation chamber, where he placed the brown jade bottle containing Shuke's essence blood and the materials needed to refine a clone in front of him. Just as he was about to start the process, an inexplicable sense of unease arose in his heart. I am currently at the early nascent soul stage. The clone I refine will be limited to the peak golden core stage. I intend to use the clone to cultivate Han Yi's Heavenly Fortune Sutra. But if I create the clone first and then have it cultivate and break through on its own, the bottleneck imposed by the calamity of heaven may be even more rigid than my own, causing unnecessary delays. It would be better for my main body to cultivate first and break through to the mid-nascent soul stage. That way, I can achieve twice the result with half the effort. After contemplating this, Li Fan temporarily put away the materials and ascended into the sky of the beast realm. I achieved my nascent soul through the 5 elements cave heaven. To break through quickly, I must deeply comprehend the laws of the 5 elements. In the Xuanwang realm, I would have to spend great effort searching for suitable opportunities. But in this beast realm, the laws of the heaven and earth operate, the 5 elements circulate, all within my grasp. Although this small world is of a lower tier, and I must avoid excessive entanglement with it due to what happened to Xiaohe, it is still more than sufficient to aid my rapid breakthrough to mid-nascent soul. Closing his eyes, Li Fan focused, and in an instant, a massive inverted hourglass seemed to appear in the sky. The 5 elements' power sustaining the beast realm was slowly drawn into it. As the 5 elements clashed, deafening explosions echoed through the air. The sky itself transformed into a brilliant tapestry of 5-colored radiance, creating a breathtaking spectacle. Lu San and Fang Ziji looked up, gazing at Li Fan, who stood motionless above the clouds, and nodded slightly. Young master's aura when cultivating is truly extraordinary. He has quite a bit of the old master's demeanor, Lu San said with some relief. Hey, I think even Lu Rushan can't compare to him, Fang Ziji retorted without giving Lu San any face. Lu San's expression stiffened, but surprisingly, he did not argue back this time. For the new to surpass the old, that is a good thing. Otherwise, wouldn't our medicine king sect be doomed to repeat the past? It is a good thing, Lu San repeated, ordering the disciples not to disturb Li Fan's cultivation. The two of them then joined forces to set up protective barriers around him, finally putting their minds at ease. Time flowed on as Li Fan immersed himself in cultivation. In the blink of an eye, 2 years passed. Everything fell into place naturally, without the slightest obstruction. When Li Fan awakened from his secluded cultivation, he had successfully broken through to the mid-nascent soul stage. It has already been anchored for 17 years. After all, I only had the assistance of the enlightenment pill. Without the spirit awakening effects of the Tianquan mirror, my progress was significantly slower. He checked his internal state. The scale of the 5 elements cave heaven within his body had expanded more than threefold compared to the early nascent soul stage. Each cave heaven was now brimming with vitality, no longer as eerily still as before. However, the emergence of true creation was still a little way off. The circulation of the 5 elements' power had accelerated noticeably, as if something was brewing within his cave heaven world. At this point, Li Fan had achieved complete control over his own 5 elements cave heaven and the beast realm. He was akin to the very Tao governing these worlds. Yet, upon closer comparison, he noticed many differences between the two. The 5 elements cave heaven had been seized from the Xuanwang realm. Although he had integrated it into himself using new techniques, it was akin to how Immortal, despite owning their own body, could not exert absolute control over every function. The operation and evolution of the cave heaven mostly occurred autonomously, following a set of inherent laws. While he could perceive every change occurring within it, his current level of comprehension was insufficient to fully understand, let alone manipulate or create at will. The beast realm, however, was different. Wind and rain, thunder and lightning, ice and fire, every manifestation of the world's laws could be dictated at a single thought. If he wished, he could freeze the beast realm in a fixed state, preventing any future changes. At the same time, he could also reshape it as he pleased. Raising mountains or leveling rivers with a single thought was merely a trivial matter. Under normal circumstances, even if one seizes all the heavenly fortune of a small world, they wouldn't be able to wield such absolute control in the beginning. It would take years of comprehension and resonance with the world's origin. But this process has already been completed for me. Xiaohe has paved the way. I am merely inheriting its legacy, reaping immense benefits. Li Fan gazed at the familiar image within the black bird feather in his body, suddenly realizing everything. Shifting his focus back to the beast realm, he saw that 2 years had passed, and the world had undergone drastic transformations. The concentration of spiritual energy had surged, now only slightly weaker than the Xuanwang realm. The once barren land had become lush and full of life. Various spirit herbs and medicinal plants were now categorized and cultivated systematically. Surprisingly, those tending the spiritual fields were none other than the beast species. However, their necks bore no sign of the so-called beast-controlling rings that Fang Ziji had previously mentioned. Li Fan scanned the entire world with his divine sense and found that only the most powerful exotic beasts bore any signs of control. As long as the rulers are subjugated, the rest will follow. Dealing with these beast species indeed requires little effort. At this time, Lu San and Fang Ziji were nowhere to be found within the beast realm. Passing through the spatial passageway to Longevity Valley, Li Fan discovered that the two were gathered, seemingly deep in discussion. Sensing Li Fan's presence, both of their faces lit up with a trace of joy. Sect Master, you have emerged from seclusion. What has happened? You both seem somewhat tense, Li Fan asked as he stepped forward. Congratulations, young master, on advancing your cultivation once again. Lu San sized him up with a smile. Fang Ziji, however, directly explained the reason for their solemn expressions. About half a year ago, a group of cultivators from the 10,000 Immortal Alliance had arrived at the White Mist aboard the Samantabhadra true boat. Initially, Lu San feared that their target was Longevity Valley and went on high alert, even mobilizing all the cultivators of the Medicine King sect, preparing for the worst. However, it soon became apparent that it was a false alarm. The cultivators did not stop at the entrance of Longevity Valley, their actual destination seemed to be even deeper within the White Mist. Relieved, Lu San assumed that the 10,000 Immortal Alliance cultivators were merely passing through by coincidence. However, what happened next made Lu San realize that he had been gravely mistaken. Over the past 6 months, every once in a while, dozens of Samantabhadra true boats filled with cultivators would sail deep into the White Mist. They seemed to be carrying out some kind of mission, exuding a faint yet chilling aura of determination. Occasionally, some cultivators would retreat from the depths of the White Mist, looking dejected and gloomy. These cultivators were generally not of very high cultivation levels, but to be safe, Lu San refrained from probing too deeply, he merely observed from a distance. Although the 10,000 Immortal Alliance cultivators did not seem to be targeting the Medicine King sect, their frequent passage through the area was concerning. No one could guarantee that, by coincidence, they wouldn't discover the location of Longevity Valley. And if they did, who could say whether a conflict with the Medicine King sect would break out? Because of this, Lu San and Fang Ziji remained on high alert during this time. Is this a covert operation by the 10,000 Immortal Alliance, or is it an open and large-scale action? Do ordinary Alliance cultivators even know about this? After listening to their report, Li Fan's eyes flickered as he immediately asked. Ordinary cultivators are unaware of it, at least, from what we've gathered so far, Fang Ziji replied. Li Fan pondered for a moment before saying, something about this is strange. We should stay put and observe for now. I'll go out and investigate the truth before making a decision. Having full confidence in Li Fan's abilities, the two immediately agreed. Afterward, Lu San took out 12 jade bottles and handed them over. These are the pills I refined during this period. 9 bottles contain a total of 81 longevity pills, 2 bottles hold 20 supreme emotionless pills, and there is also one. Lu San paused for a moment, his expression turning slightly strange. It is a heart desire ascension pill. Elder Lu, you've worked hard. Li Fan put away the other pills and took the jade bottle containing the heart desire ascension pill, intending to open it and inspect its contents. But suddenly, Lu San stopped him. Is there something wrong with this pill? Li Fan frowned. Lu San let out a bitter smile. This pill is not poisonous, but its actual harm is no less than that of the deadliest poisons in the world. The Heart Desire Ascension pill is an extremely rare byproduct that can appear during the refinement of the Supreme Emotionless pill. Any cultivator who consumes it will experience an overwhelming illusion of comprehending the Great Tao and achieving immediate ascension to immortality. At this point, Fang Ziji added, furthermore, the more one consumes, the stronger this illusion becomes. In the end, those who become addicted to it will do anything just to relive the taste of ascension once more. Li Fan instinctively tightened his grip on the jade bottle in his hand. He now understood exactly what this so-called Heart Desire Ascension pill was. In the past, this pill caused massive turmoil, so it was completely forbidden under the jurisdiction of the 10 great immortal sects. However, based on what our disciples have found, the current 10,000 Immortal Alliance does not seem to have banned this pill. I thought this item might be of use to the young master, so I did not destroy it, Lu San explained. The addictive nature of this Heart Desire Ascension pill, how severe is it? Li Fan weighed the jade bottle in his hand with interest and asked. The closer one is to the legendary true immortal realm, the greater the craving for it after consumption, Lu San said with an extremely solemn expression. Perhaps someone with an extraordinarily strong will could resist the temptation to take another one, but... Lu San shook his head. At least, in our era, such individuals were exceedingly rare. Li Fan's eyes flickered slightly as he stored the jade bottle away. If Elder Lu refines more of this pill in the future, you should keep them all. They may be useful at a critical moment, Li Fan instructed. Lu San nodded in agreement. By the way, I also need to trouble Mr. Fang to refine a few protective artifacts for me. At this moment, Li Fan turned to Fang Ziji and spoke. Oh, what kind does the sect master want? The mention of his expertise immediately piqued Fang Ziji's interest. At the very least, they should be able to withstand attacks from ordinary soul transformation cultivators. Can you manage that, Mr. Fang? Knowing Fang Ziji's temperament well after spending time together, Li Fan deliberately set a lower requirement and smiled. As expected, Fang Ziji, who was quite prideful about his craftsmanship, was provoked. Young master, you underestimate me. Forget soul transformation cultivators, even refining artifacts that can withstand Dao integration cultivators is not difficult. However, it would just require more materials, Fang Ziji murmured. Seeing that this concerned the young master's safety, Lu San spoke up. No problem, the Medicine King Cauldron still holds some materials, enough for you to craft them. Fang Ziji was momentarily stunned. The Medicine King Cauldron? Impossible, I've studied it for so long, how could I have missed that? Lu San sneered. Looks like your skills still have a long way to go. Without further explanation, he flew into the Medicine King Cauldron. Moments later, he returned and casually tossed a storage ring to Fang Ziji. Fang Ziji took the ring, glanced inside, and immediately cried out in excitement. Xuanwei Ancient Bamboo, Black Demon Gold, Purple Essence Sand. So many rare treasures. Lu San smirked dismissively. Our Medicine King sect was once one of the wealthiest sects. If we truly decided to withdraw, do you think we wouldn't have prepared adequately? A sudden thought made Lu San's expression dim slightly. Don't worry about that. Just focus on crafting the protective artifacts for the young master. If the materials aren't enough, you can ask me for more. This time, Fang Ziji did not argue. Instead, he gazed delightedly at the various rare materials in the ring and began contemplating what kind of artifacts to forge. Mr. Fang, could you craft a white robe and a folding fan for me? At that moment, Li Fan suddenly suggested. A white robe, and a folding fan. Fang Ziji was stunned. But seeing Li Fan's unquestionable gaze, he had no choice but to mutter in agreement. After temporarily leaving the two, Li Fan entered a secluded chamber. He once again took out Shu Kei's blood essence and various materials. Following Xiao Hei's memories of an adult Shu Kei's appearance, he even enhanced the facial features, concentrating fully on refining a new clone. This clone was crucial for obtaining the subsequent techniques of the mountain sitting art, so Li Fan was more meticulous than ever. 7 days and nights passed. A perfectly refined male body appeared before Li Fan. His features were exceptionally handsome, his skin smooth and fair like porcelain. Stars seemed to glimmer in his eyes, and his faint smile carried an ethereal charm, like a banished immortal from the heavens. Even Li Fan couldn't help but be momentarily captivated by the clone's unparalleled beauty. It was only then that he realized, while striving to perfect the clone's appearance, he had unconsciously modeled it after the most handsome man he had ever seen, Mr. Bai. This also resulted in the clone bearing a striking resemblance to Mr. Bai. Of course, it was only a resemblance. The general mold was still based on Shu Kei's appearance. There shouldn't be any issues, right? The clone's appearance was so flawless that even with some minor unexpected deviations, Li Fan had no intention of refining a new one. Besides, all of Shu Kei's essence blood has already been used up. If I were to refine another one, it wouldn't be nearly as effective as this one. Li Fan stared at the clone before him. After a moment of contemplation, he finally slashed his finger through the air, activating the clone. The sensation of experiencing two perspectives simultaneously surged once again. Although it is at the nascent soul stage, it's merely an empty shell. But that's fine. The clone dressed itself, sat cross-legged on the ground, and immediately began cultivating the Heavenly Fortune Sutra. Meanwhile, the original body retrieved the feather of the black bird and handed it to the clone. Using a foundation establishment technique at the nascent soul stage was already an overwhelming advantage. Coupled with the terrifying heaven and earth fortune stored within the black bird feather, the clone instantly absorbed it and completed the foundation establishment process. However, the foundation establishment stage was far from sufficient to fulfill the clone's mission requirements, it had to continue advancing. Li Fan crushed several top-grade spirit stones, unleashing an incredibly pure aura that instantly formed a swirling vortex within the chamber, madly rushing into the clone's body. The clone absorbed and refined all the energy like a great whale drinking water. In less than half a day, a golden core formed in the clone's dantian. The surface of the golden core occasionally flashed with a faint purple hue, radiating an extraordinary air of nobility. Though it is a single-method golden core, this heavenly fortune technique is practically tailor-made for the clone. Furthermore, Shu Kei's essence blood has a unique connection with the black bird feather. Its power might not be inferior to an ordinary 4-method golden core. Li Fan nodded in satisfaction. After the golden core stage came the nascent soul stage. Under normal circumstances, to maintain a perfect disguise, one would have to find a cave heaven for the clone to absorb. However, thanks to the existence of the beast realm, this trouble was easily bypassed. With a single thought, the original body carried the clone into the beast realm. Compared to Li Fan himself, the clone was far more adept at perceiving and manipulating the world's fortune within the beast realm. Indeed, people should not be judged by the same standard. Realizing the disparity between them, Li Fan couldn't help but sigh slightly. The clone closed its eyes and levitated midair. Spiritual energy from all directions in the realm began converging upon him. Even more astonishingly, mountains and rivers within the beast realm rose into the sky, rushing toward Li Fan's feet. The land compressed itself, forming a miniature cave heaven at a speed tens of millions of times faster than natural evolution. This grand spectacle naturally startled the disciples of the Medicine King sect. However, upon seeing their sect master, Li Fan, present, none dared to act recklessly. Instead, all their gazes fixated on the breathtakingly handsome man beside Li Fan, unable to look away. Privately, they speculated about his true identity. Extracting nearly 1/30th of the Beastkind realm's world essence, a Beast Realm cave heaven was formed. Under the watchful eyes of many, the clone swallowed the cave heaven into its body. With the successful formation of his nascent soul, the clone now exuded an even more ethereal and transcendent aura, as if detached from the mortal world. Not to mention the ordinary disciples of the Medicine King sect, who were staring in awe. Even Lu San and Fang Ziji, who had hurried over after sensing the disturbance, were momentarily stunned. With Shu Kei's blood essence and appearance, combined with Mr. Bai's demeanor. How about calling him Shu Bai from now on? Li Fan looked at his clone with satisfaction and nodded approvingly. Shu Bai cupped his hands toward Li Fan and offered a faint smile. The gathered disciples below gasped audibly in astonishment. Young master, this is, Lu San stepped forward, looking at Shu Bai with a trace of doubt in his eyes. During this period, he had been guarding the entrance to the Longevity Valley to prevent any cultivators from the 10,000 Immortal Alliance hidden in the white mist from infiltrating. Yet, he had no idea when this person had entered. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air. A suspicion formed in Lu San's mind, but he still found it hard to believe. So, he sought confirmation from Li Fan. This isn't the right place to talk. Follow me. Noting Fang Ziji's similar look of confusion, Li Fan led both of them, along with Shu Bai, into a secluded meditation chamber. This is a clone that I refined. Shu Bai spoke directly. As expected, Lu San suddenly understood but still had lingering doubts. The technique of refining clones is indeed rare, but with young master's abilities, obtaining such a method wouldn't be difficult. However, why did you refine a clone that is so high profile? Lu San glanced at Shu Bai again, still unable to understand. Li Fan simply smiled and did not answer. Instead, he changed the subject. By the way, how is the artifact refinement coming along, Mr. Fang? Fang Ziji immediately caught on. The white robe and folding fan, are they for this clone? He chuckled. I was wondering, that style doesn't suit you at all, sect master. Refining an artifact at the Dao integration level is no easy feat. It'll take at least another 6 months. Besides, Fang Ziji took a closer look at Shu Bai and suddenly frowned. The original design I planned won't be a good match for this clone. No, I need to start over. The more he looked, the more he felt that the previously envisioned white robe and folding fan would not do justice to Shu Bai's presence. Just as he was about to rush off to draft a new refinement plan, Li Fan stopped him in time. 3 years have passed since the Crimson Flame Burning Sea incident. It's time for the disciples to re-enter the mortal world. Besides, my plans require their cooperation. Li Fan said calmly. Lu San and Fang Ziji had no objections to this decision. However, returning to the mortal world also means increased risks. If any disciples are unfortunate enough to encounter danger and have their souls forcibly searched, the secrets of Longevity Valley and the Beast Realm may be exposed. What should we do then? Li Fan looked at the two Dao integration cultivators and asked for their opinions. I only specialize in artifact refinement. You'll have to ask old Lu about this one. Fang Ziji shrugged, indicating that this was beyond his expertise. Lu San did not decline and, after pondering for a long time, gave his answer. A single person's mind can be broken, but the minds of millions are difficult to breach. Currently, inside the Medicine King True Cauldron, the Great Dream Spring and Autumn formation is still operating. As long as our disciples connect a strand of their divine sense to it before leaving, the formation will activate a counterattack if they are forcibly subjected to a soul search. Unless the enemy's soul is stronger than the combined souls of all the Medicine King sect cultivators, even in their slumber, they will not be able to extract any information from our disciples' minds. The Great Dream Spring and Autumn formation essentially links the thoughts of all participating cultivators into a grand dreamscape. This not only allows them to unite and resist external divine sense attacks but also enables them to use the power of dreams to seal specific memories. Just as mortals do not realize they are dreaming, disciples will be unaware of the sealed information. Moreover, even if they are scattered across different regions of the Xuanwang realm, they can instantly communicate through the formation without being noticed by outsiders. Lu San carefully explained another wondrous function of the Great Dream Spring and Autumn formation to Li Fan. Hearing this, Li Fan was very satisfied. Then I will have to trouble Elder Lu with this matter. Once the disciples go out, they may act freely, only needing to casually inquire about the Heavenly Spirit Flower when the opportunity arises. The Heavenly Spirit Flower is a unique treasure of the Tianling Prefecture within the 10,000 Immortal Alliance. Blessed by the essence of the heavens, it is breathtakingly beautiful. However, after the great battle in Tianling Prefecture several years ago, it underwent a strange transformation. Lu San did not question Li Fan's reasoning for this order but firmly committed it to memory. After issuing the necessary instructions, Lu San immediately began organizing the disciples' connection to the formation. Meanwhile, Li Fan departed ahead of time, leaving Longevity Valley. Longevity Valley was located within the White Mist Barrier, at the border between Luoyang Prefecture and Luoyang Prefecture. Avoiding patrolling cultivators, Li Fan silently left the mist and arrived in the city of Tiancheng within Luoyang Prefecture. Although located in the heart of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance, Luoyang Prefecture was not much more prosperous than Kongyansi. In fact, it had even fewer cultivators. Most of Luoyang Prefecture was barren and lacked resources, but more importantly, it was plagued by strange occurrences. For example, Li Fan was quite familiar with the heart monkey, which had once broken out in a massive outbreak in this region. Although the 10,000 Immortal Alliance did not keep detailed records of this event, in previous lifetimes, Li Fan noticed that when purchasing heart monkey bones in large quantities, most of them originated from Luoyang Prefecture. This led him to suspect the connection. At this moment, Luoyang City was rather desolate. Upon arriving at the Tianshuan Mirror, the first thing Li Fan did was search for information on addictive pills. Although Lu San had mentioned that the disciples had already inquired and it seemed that the 10,000 Immortal Alliance did not prohibit such substances, Li Fan knew that many secrets were hidden behind the merit ranking system. Not all knowledge was accessible to ordinary cultivators. There were plenty of cultivators in the 10,000 Immortal Alliance who had unknowingly broken taboos and died without ever understanding why. Since this matter was crucial to his future plans, Li Fan had to confirm the Alliance's stance. His current identity was still that of a clean slate, with a merit rank of 1, but this did not prevent him from gathering information. Taking out a jade bottle containing Heart Desire Ascension Pill, Li Fan prepared to list it for sale in the market. Suddenly, warning, the pill you are attempting to sell is a prohibited item. Your trading privileges have been temporarily frozen. Please dispose of the contraband immediately. Warning. A sharp, mechanical voice from the Tianshuan Mirror suddenly sounded, repeating itself incessantly. Li Fan feigned an expression of extreme shock and innocence. What? A contraband item? What do you mean by that? Isn't it just an ordinary pill? The Tianshuan Mirror's cold voice repeated. Heart Desire Ascension Pill, rank 3674 on the 10,000 Immortal Alliance's list of prohibited circulation items. Hazard level, grade B+. Please dispose of it immediately. Upon hearing the prompt from the Tianshuan Mirror, Li Fan's eyes narrowed instantly. Heart Desire Ascension Pill, and its danger level is only ranked a little over 3000. What kind of things have the cultivators of the 10,000 Immortal Alliance been tinkering with all these years? Though a certain plan had just fallen apart, Li Fan wasn't particularly surprised. After all, the 10,000 Immortal Alliance prioritized stability above all else. Any item capable of disrupting the balance of power would inevitably be subjected to strict control. Just imagine, if a Tao integration cultivator addicted to the Heart Desire Ascension pill were to suffer withdrawal, how much destruction would they unleash? The fact that it was banned wasn't surprising, it would have been odd if it weren't. Just my luck, turns out this damn thing is contraband. Inside the Tianquan mirror, Li Fan feigned an expression of frustration. But, after all the effort I put into obtaining it, instead of destroying it. He pretended to flash a ruthless look in his eyes. I might as well take it myself. With that, he made a show of swallowing the pill right in front of the Tianquan mirror. Warning: consumption of the Heart Desire Ascension pill will result in imprisonment for a duration proportional to the cultivator's potential danger level, along with forced withdrawal treatment. This will cause irreversible damage to both body and mind. Warning: Li Fan's body stiffened slightly, stopping just before he could actually consume the pill. Cursing under his breath, he crushed the Heart Desire Ascension pill into powder with a single squeeze. Satisfied now? No, I can't let this go. That bastard dared to deceive me, I have to settle this score. As if growing angrier by the second, Li Fan stormed out of the Tianquan mirror, left Luoyan City, and flew deep into the wilderness. Only when he reached a desolate, uninhabited place and ensured that no one had followed him did he finally stop. Turning into a streak of light, he descended underground and skillfully excavated a secret chamber. From within his palm, he carefully retrieved and recondensed a small amount of the Heart Desire Ascension pill's powder, which he had deliberately preserved. Moments later, a miniature version of the Heart Desire Ascension pill, shrunken by dozens of times, appeared in his hand. Splitting it in two, Li Fan gazed at one half before consuming it. He wasn't taking it due to addiction but to verify a certain suspicion he had. The microdose melted the moment it touched his tongue, transforming into a warm current that surged through his entire body. A slight dizziness washed over his mind. For a fleeting moment, Li Fan felt as if he was once again witnessing the interwoven celestial network, the vast and intricate net of heaven and earth's truths that he had previously glimpsed while comprehending the human Tao stardust. However, this time, it was 100 times clearer than before. It felt within reach, as if he could grasp it at any moment. The fundamental truths of heaven and earth were laid bare before his eyes. His eyes widened involuntarily, eager to see more. But just then, the pill's effects wore off. Like an illusion dissolving into mist, the profound scene before him shattered and vanished. An indescribable emptiness surged into his heart. Damn it, I was so close. The truths of heaven and earth, they were right there within my grasp. Quick, I need to have Lu San refine more of it. Thoughts like these, fierce and overwhelming, stormed through Li Fan's mind like a raging hurricane. He shot to his feet. But he did not leave the chamber. Instead, his expression twisted with determination. I seek immortality, why should I rely on mere pills? To ordinary people, missing a chance at immortality might mean eternal regret. But for me, a single fleeting opportunity is meaningless. My chances are infinite, limitless, inexhaustible. If I miss it in this life, then I'll seize it in the next. If I miss it again in the next, then I will try once more in the life after that. Li Fan, driven by his own will, began to resist the effects of the Heart Desire Ascension pill. His face contorted, his entire body trembling uncontrollably. Exerting all his strength, he fought against the wild, unrestrained desires surging within him. Thus, half a day passed. After all, it was merely some powdered residue rather than a complete Heart Desire Ascension pill. Yet, Li Fan managed to endure the addiction. All sorts of distracting thoughts receded like a tide, and when he recalled the pill, he no longer felt the slightest craving. This thing is truly terrifying. If it had been a complete ascension pill, relying solely on my current willpower, I fear I still wouldn't have been able to resist its temptation. However, if I use the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra to assist me, it will be a different story. Li Fan let out a deep breath, steadied his mind, and then swallowed the remaining half of the ascension pill. The moment the desire surged again, he activated the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra. Just as before, Li Fan once again saw the immense net woven from the principles of heaven and earth. But under the influence of the Immortal Heart Mantra, his mind was as calm as still water, completely devoid of impulsive urges. And so, he waited in silence for the effects to subside. When the hallucinations before his eyes abruptly vanished and the emptiness and longing resurfaced in his heart, the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra began to operate slowly. Before these desires could affect his mind, they were instantly absorbed, transformed into nourishment for the mantra itself. Claiming to be an immortal before true immortals, what an utter joke. Li Fan felt not even the slightest ripple in his heart. No matter what, at least one thing is confirmed. Taking this heart desire ascension pill can indeed assist in cultivating the Xuanwang Immortal Heart Mantra, and I don't even have to worry about side effects. Once the desires faded, Li Fan ceased operating the Immortal Heart Mantra. At present, he was still unable to keep the mantra running instinctively, like breathing. Perhaps only when he fully completed the mantra would he achieve such an effect. As he left the underground chamber and set off toward Tianling Prefecture, a sudden thought surfaced in his mind. The heaven and earth principles seen under the effects of the heart desire ascension pill are nothing more than illusions that are nearly real. No matter how many I take, they will never lead to true enlightenment. But on the other hand, if I could witness the real laws of heaven and earth, the kind that cultivators are inherently incapable of comprehending, wouldn't the effect be even better? After all, no matter how real an illusion may seem, it can never compare to true existence. A pill that can genuinely help cultivators attain enlightenment wouldn't be something the 10,000 Immortal Alliance would ban. But what if, among a batch of ineffective pseudo-law pills, there were one or two that actually contained a trace of heaven and earth's true principles? Lost in thought, a strange smile crept onto Li Fan's lips. When he arrived at Tianling City, he temporarily set his thoughts aside. He headed straight for a shop that sold heavenly spirit flowers. "Shopkeeper, give me a pot of heavenly spirit flowers," Li Fan said. "Right away, sir. Please take a look over here. We have top quality ones with 16 to 20 petals, our shop has them all." The shopkeeper responded enthusiastically. However, after scanning the dozens of heavenly spirit flowers displayed in the shop, Li Fan's expression darkened immediately. "You scoundrel, are you trying to take advantage of me just because I'm an outsider? These pathetic things dare to bear the name, heavenly spirit. Why do all these flowers have a strange, eerie blood-like flow within them? What an absolute eyesore!" Li Fan cursed loudly, his voice booming like thunder, instantly drawing the attention of many cultivators nearby. "Ah, sir, you may not know this," the shopkeeper sighed bitterly, "but ever since a few years ago, all the heavenly spirit flowers that have grown in this region have been like this.